Hello and welcome to Lorebeards. Are we coming through nice and loud at your end? If not, do please drop a comment. And I'm excited for today's subject because it is somewhat of a favorite of ours, I think.
Yeah, considering that I I don't know why I thought the other two options were gonna do okay. I should have known better. I was surprised how many votes Musion got, though.
Yeah, so was I, actually. I was pretty pleased about that one because I'm quite looking forward to having a chat about Mousselon in the future because brilliant location, loads of fun details. And I think I might be the only person to actually map it officially.
Yeah, your favorite map, if I recall.
I freaking hate that map. So let's not even start with that one.
Anyway, fish.
So yes, today is Fishmen, and this is one of those subjects that is almost tinfoil hat area, in that a lot of people go, Fishmen, fuck off, they don't exist in the Warhammer world. What are you talking about? And indeed, as someone who is a great fan of those deep lore dives, I think you might be surprised at just how many times Fishmen and their equivalents are mentioned inside the official background. So I think this stream is going to be quite a lot of fun for the pair of us, because I think between us, we've got all manner of little squiggly bits that we're almost certain to try and dredge out of the water for you all to see in the cold, stark sunlight with the gills flapping, going, no, we don't exist. Let us go.
Yeah, because, we totally don't have any experience with a race of mythical creatures that are actually everywhere or something like that.
100%.
Nothing like that.
Nothing in the slightest. It's certainly not a Warhammer trope. I'm particularly liking this one as well because this is one of the examples of a species that has been seeded not just from the beginning of the current edition or later editions, but right from the very beginning of Warhammer. This is not a species that is new. This is one that has been dropped again and again. And we can also not just confirm, but we can state without any shadow of a doubt that when we come round to viewing what is considered canon by Games Workshop, I'm getting a slight echo at my side. I might be catching your headset there, Sotek. Just say, am I still? Yes, it was that. Okay, so
I will move it further
definitely
away.
Catching that. Your mic's so sensitive, I was hearing myself in my ears, or I'm just that loud.
I'm gonna leave it up there.
So anyway, as I was saying, we can say, can I feel it now? Hey, Hammond, great to see you there. Fish, fish, fish. Anyway. Fishmen, we can say without any shadow of doubt or contradiction, are in the 8th edition of Warhammer, which means that as far as the canon of work is concerned that can be drawn upon by licensees or anyone else, they are in there, which means that this isn't just a species that has been lost to the midst of time and possibly could make a resurgence. This is a species that does exist, has existed, and has always existed throughout the various iterations of Warhammer.
Yeah, and like Andy said, if you go back far enough, there used to be Fishmen minis. They were little metal guys, and their art was like, for the time, if you were to modernize it, they're quite nasty looking critters.
They are. All the way back then, most of the art was done for all the miniatures were done with little pieces of art. And these ones, as I recall, weren't done by Anthony, who did most of the early stuff, because he just bang out images for all the miniatures. But as I recall, these miniatures weren't even made by Citadel. It was one of the companies that Citadel brought in. And they got their little Fishmen models. They look pretty awful. I dropped the original artwork for them on the poster on our advert for this one because I thought it was hilarious. The other piece of art was one that I believe that you commissioned. Is that not right?
Yes, that is correct. I commissioned it for a Halloween episode like 2 or 3 years ago.
Okay, so with those in mind, the men fish, because hey, Warhammer, let's flip it around. The men fish were very first mentioned all the way back in the Citadel Companion. So that'd be what? 1984, I think, for the fourth one, I think it was. No, Citadel Compendium, that's what it was. The Citadel Compendium, and you got the Menfish in an advert in there because of those models that they had, and they originally got statted out in Warhammer. Here we go, you ready? Warhammer 1st Edition.
Ooh. Original race.
The actual first edition, which means that they predate many species that we know and love all the way through to today, including such things as the Skaven. They predate the Skaven, which is, given that they are also super secretive, kind of funny. So they're there all the way back in the very first edition of the game, and they're presented in the typical style of the time, where they were saying that they were making raids at night, often under moonless skies, and they were raiding elves and dwarves and goblins and men and the rest of them, much like any other good old Warhammer species was doing. They could see in the dark, they could make their way through swamps and murks and mires. But as one interesting point, which I think will allude to later, right at the very beginning, the fishmen are marked as being able to make their way through both saltwater and freshwater, which is quite interesting, given that there's a couple of species that later on could also be a resurgence or a version of menfish or fishmen that are popped up in later editions of the game.
Yes. So with all that kind of in mind, I think it's worth delving into. I think, like Andy said, it's going to be best to start from, let's start in a safe place on land where there's solid foundation under our feet, and then we'll kind of wander from there and see where we end up. But the first place that's best to start is with the 100% stated occurrences where we get to see them. A few instances, which is that they show up a lot in naval books. Factions that are known to have functional navies will almost always have a little snippet about the fishmen. And the big times we see them are with the Dark Elves, the High Elves, the Lizardmen, fun enough.
Several times with Lizardmen.
Yep, and the Warriors of Chaos. Those tend to be the big factions that feature the fishmen the most heavily. And the Dark Elves and the Lizardmen get the most out of them. Which is that so starting with the easier ones, with the Warriors of Chaos and the High Elves, there are just mentions that sometimes when their ships are out at sea and they're out in the dark, and usually that it's Morslib is out or there's no moon out. But it's often very, very dark. Sometimes an isolated ship will get attacked from something beneath. And they'll talk about these weird, horrible, troglodyte, pale fishmen that will clamber up onto the ships, and their mouths are full of row upon row of needle-sharp teeth, and they just start killing everyone and dragging people down beneath the depths.
In particular, just to make it very clear how canonical these are, this is in the Warhammer Fantasy Battle Book 8th edition. It's actually in there. Oh, well, let's bring up Biofoot first before we go. Thanks very much, Biofoot. You rock. Did the world just end before the fishmen could show up? P.S. Hello, Twitch chat. Fetching attire today. Very distinguished. Twitch, you've been called out already. I'm not quite sure there. Did the world end just before the fishmen could show up? I think the fishmen have been showing up throughout the course of time. It's just that they never had their big resurgence. So there is an interesting kind of meta point to point out, which I do think is interesting, which is that in the are you going to go into the Deepkin here?
No, before Deepkin. So in the 8th edition Warhammer Fantasy Big Red Book, the Big Rule book, they did include a really weird rule, which was the aquatic rule for monsters. Or no, it wasn't aquatic. It was I can't remember what the name of the rule is, but there was a special rule that it was in the special rule section near the end.
My copy's not here. I can't look it up for you.
And I could, but whatever. But it was a special rule that basically said that there were some creatures that it said if a monster has this rule, then it moves at half speed if it's not in water-based terrain. So, like they said, if it was in marsh terrain, rivers, lakes, or anything like that, then it could move full speed. But if it was out of those forms of terrain, it could only move at half speed. So this was a core rule in the Big Red Book, and they never used it.
Yeah, and also in that book, it's got a lovely little mention of some Dark Elf Corsairs who all the way back approximately, 2,000 years before the setting point of Warhammer 8th edition. They've got a nice little bit in their timeline where Dark Elf Corsairs face off against a horrendous set of creatures from the deep. And if I recall, they had a Kraken-like submersible ships, which looked they had half Krakens on them, and they had ships on the back of them with a bunch of effectively fish folk with long spiny teeth, needle-like fanged warriors. Only a single dark elf survives this attack, just one of them. And that dark elf crawls all the way back to Naggaroth and goes, here, I got taken down by these. I did. And they were all like, ha, salt fever, nonsense. Fishmen, they don't exist, nonsense. While simultaneously, the dark elves are also, through multiple times later, realizing there are a host, not just one, but multiple potential civilizations that live beneath the waves. But that's written right into the core book. And that, I think, speaks to two things. Something that I think was being hinted at there by Sotek. And that's that not only were the Fishmen definitely something that were sitting in the back of their minds, but secondly, we have rules getting set up. They were a potential development that the studio was, at least perhaps with one writer, considering should Warhammer 8th edition have landed really, really well and become enormously popular. And indeed, I think there's also an argument that possibly those ideas were developed as one of the very, very first species that was put out for Age of Sigmar was the Deepkin.
Yeah, I do think that, because there is a noticeable point, I think, in 8th edition where you can kind of, through the writing of the army book, see them go from, we're developing 8th edition to, okay, no, we're developing the end times. So I think when they initially made the Big Red Book, I actually would not have been surprised if they were initially planning for a fish people race. But once they decided on the end times and they started prepping for Age of Sigmar, they pivoted that into the Idoneth Deepkin.
Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me at all. This, however, is tinfoil hat conspiracy.
Yeah, it is very tinfoil.
This isn't something that I've ever had confirmed, nor have I ever asked it. I was in a position where I could have, but I was too busy asking questions that were completely different and more relevant to the job that I had at the time. However, because they are very clearly written into the book, if I had wanted to write about them for the role-playing game, for example, there would have been no problems. They'd have just said, yeah, sure, away you go, do whatever you want with them, which I think is something that's really quite interesting in terms of the, are they real, are they not? The answer is they are. They just are. This isn't a species that is possibly real. Oh, they're hinted at. They're only in a footnote over here and never named. No, these are real things. We have a comment. Hey, Sean, you rock, Sean. Thank you very much. Does Gelt, Andy's favorite, know the Fishman? He can swim with the frickin' fishes, as far as I'm concerned. Concrete wellies for Gelt.
You know, okay, so this actually opens a genuine question for me, for you. Okay. Kind of related, but how much do you think the Supreme Patriarch tends to know about, like, the big secrets of the world? As far as they have access to all these libraries, they're kind of at the highest echelon. I mean, Skaven, Fishmen, all these other kind of secret races.
Skaven, yes, definitely. Skaven are a known quantity and entity in the upper echelons of power. They are not just a whispered thing that is well known. You've got various backgrounds which claim there's spells in place, but equally those spells would be easily dispelled when you're dealing with the confluence of magic that is at the heart of the Empire. As for Fishmen, though, I think they would be quite literally in rumor territory, as in, we heard this silly thing from some village that has been attacked or something that has occurred. Should it be investigated? They get there and it's just a bunch of corpses and dead folk. Anyway, Mr. Pig also came in. Thank you very much, Mr. Pig. Isn't there another species in Age of Sigmar that the Deepkin fought that could be the Fishmen?
Okay, so yes, there is. The Fishmen have survived into Age of Sigmar, and they got an official name, which they're called the Chasm Dwellers. Or they're also called the oh god, what is it? It's like I can't remember the exact term, but
I'm enjoying this.
They are given an official name, and their kind of title is the Chasm Dwellers. And the Fishmen fought them during the Age of Myth over the, like, deep places of the sea that the Deepkin took over, because the Deepkin won, and they pushed out the Chasm Dwellers, who they're hoping were wiped out, but it's of course very heavily implied they were not wiped out, and are, you know, waiting to Aboleth. Thank you, Aboleth. Yes, the Aboleths. And it's very heavily, you know, kind of suggested that they might come back, and, you know, try and reclaim their ancestral home that the Idoneth took from them.
So I'm going to do two things. First one is bring this one up here from Luring Lion. Anyone else having weird lag issues? I hope not, but if you are, we're also over on Twitch, over on Lawhammering over there. So if you are having an issue, do try over on Twitch if you're having any problems on your side. And it appears that some people don't have lag, some people do, but if you are lagging, we also have Twitch as well. So do dive
Yeah,
over
and there are people that seem to be moving from YouTube to Twitch, and they're saying Twitch is not having any lag. So that seems to be a YouTube issue if you want to move.
And I'm going to bring up a second comment just so I can say nerdy, nerdy, nerner. Lindsay is fishing. This is my wife who is looking to try and confirm details for our campaign. She has a theory. I refuse to answer that question. Thou art banished.
Oh, no, wait.
Banished.
I can answer.
No, banished.
So there is a lot of evidence suggesting that the old ones took a species that was already in Lustria and evolved them into the lizardmen. And we know that there are a series of places in Lustria that have a very strong connection with a mysterious underwater race, even mentioning gods that predate the old ones. So it could be that what is left of that species that escaped from the old ones may well be the Fishmen.
And annoyingly, I'm going to be supporting that particular line of thought later when we discuss some of the other Fishman evidence. Not that I'm annoyed. Banished!
Oh, man. Continuing on with the Dark Elves, we do have the whole incident with that ship of Corsairs that had a really bad time, and one got away. Which that happens a surprising amount of the time. Though
there's always one to tell the tale.
Yeah, though I do find it funny that when the one high elf escaped Lustria and told the high elves about the lizardmen, they were like, "Oh, okay, yeah, we should believe this guy and take this seriously." And the dark elves are like, "Nah, that's fucking ridiculous. No, y'all are idiots. No."
I can't believe they wouldn't believe it. I mean, have you seen the Warhammer world?
Yeah, I know.
Crazy shit that's in it. Seriously.
And then, and of course, the Warriors of Chaos have had a lot of incidents as well, where the Norskins have full-on dedicated myths and warnings about sailing the seas under certain conditions. Because under certain conditions, there are things that come up from below and will attack. And they're often quite scared of them. And they've even kind of attributed, sometimes they throw sacrifices into the seas or perform various rituals to placate the things beneath so that it'll leave them alone and they can go about their raids and be left to their own business.
Okay, now here I'm about to annoy myself by answering Lindsay's question to a degree. So Lord Valdison, a particularly naughty Chaos Lord, he actually went swimming down to raid an underwater pyramid. Since we're dealing with Chaos people. And he was a Chaos Lord. He went down there with his Chaos Lord peeps. So a bunch of Chaos Warriors. I don't know how they did it. The quotation doesn't explain how they did it. I presume they just all dived in. Their magic Chaos Warrior and their Chaos armor allowed them to survive because, hey, Chaos armor. But they went down there, and the quotation there marks them as fighting against the local inhabitants who were not lizardmen, but were scaly fish people with scaled, nasty, clawed hands. And was there anything else in that one? I'm pretty sure it's just scaled, webbed, fingered hands for that one, but not lizardmen. So we have our first association, at least in this stream so far, with the old ones, the pyramid type constructions that they have, and the Fishmen. And this will pop up again, particularly given that one of the great lizardman cities at one point sinks into the sea, and that also becomes populated with people from beyond.
Yes, it does.
Hey, Hammond.
Wouldn't they think they're Myrmidus' followers? Some probably would. It depends on the Norscan tribe in question, because the Norscan tribes are all very various. But there are absolutely some that would look at that and go, "Oh yeah, it's Myrmidus sending people up because we haven't been making proper offerings or we haven't been properly placating him."
Absolutely, that's what can be said to that. When it comes to Norsemith, they're not just not one people. They're one gigantic fragmented mess of a host of different tribesfolk who worship all manner of different stuff and believe all manner of different things. And Norska is almost unbelievably huge, a truly big place. So you could almost say any belief system and you'll probably find it up there. But they do have certain things in common. Hey, CB4N.
Twitch has no lag, but it sucks because it's still Twitch. All right. I mean,
there's little I can say to that other than Fair enough.
Yeah, okay, fair criticism. All right, so
Just bringing it up though, if you are having issues over on YouTube, apparently Twitch is running nice and smoothly.
Yeah, and I'm seeing from other people talking that it's not just our channel. Apparently, a lot of YouTube is having problems in the last 24 hours. So
there we go. There we go. Roderick, I missed the first few minutes and just want to make sure you did the song. We'll maybe do that later. Roderick over on the Lawhammer Discord posted a Fishman song, and holy crap.
Oh man, a full on dedicated.
Yeah. Oh no. The little fishmen all the way through. It's absolutely horrible. I love it.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about the biggest one. So there is one time where Games Workshop went hard as fuck, to be frank, on the Fishmen, which is in the Dark Elves 8th edition army book. Actually, no, I think it was 7th edition, not 8th edition.
I think 7th. It's not 8th.
So in 7th edition, they explain the full big crowning moment that makes everyone's favorite Corsair Lord. Oh my God, his Blood Bowl name is in my head.
Look here.
Yeah, thank you. Look here, Fellheart. My brain goes Kirioth Krakenhelm, and I'm like, wait, no, that's not right.
Look here, Fellheart.
Can you tell I was looking at his Blood Bowl mini yesterday? I don't know why they changed his name.
Let's bring this one up from Chris. Thanks for the question. The stream title says Fishmen are demons. If so, what interaction do they have with the Maelstrom? Good question. Do they occupy the tunnel through the planet? So that was just a prosaic title because it amused me because it harked back to a fighting fantasy game book called Demons of the Deep. That was it. It was literally nothing else because those who are aware of the Fishmen often think of them as horrific creatures that come from the depths, which are often equated with demons in the same way that the Fimmer are often called bog demons, even though in truth they aren't themselves demons. So that's the only reason that was there. As for the rest, jump on?
There's a hilarious in-universe thing where people, if they don't understand what's going on, they always blame it on demons, which, fair, but we'll come back to that. There actually is something within that I think we can come back to later about, do the Fishmen have demons, which is something we'll get into. But
I think it's super interesting. Let me just also mention as well that I wouldn't exactly say that there's a tunnel through the planet. We discussed this in the Great Maw video that we did previously. Go check out in our previous videos. The Maw itself, for all it does burrow through the planet, doesn't necessarily do that physically. It's not strictly speaking just a material entity, but go check that stream if you want more deets on that one, Chris. Thank you very much there, though. It's super appreciated. We will get to the rest of it very soon.
Yes. So, look here, Fellheart.
Look here.
Yeah, just like the story Andy kind of talked about with the Chaos Lords, there is this ridiculously epic story that is surprisingly detailed that says that Look here, Fellheart somehow, some way heard about a sunken city. And this was the sunken city of Chup-Yodel, which Chup-Yodel was a prominent lizardman city. It was actually one of the handful that survived the cataclysm. And yet, quite a ways after the cataclysm, there was a big tsunami, which we'll come back to later, that destroyed a lot of that part of Lustria, like the whole shoreline, and Chup-Yodel itself sank beneath the waves. Thanks, Christopher, thank you so much for the super chat. Thank you.
You rock.
So what's interesting is that it sunk to the bottom of this massive trench. Like, it didn't just go a little bit underwater. It went way down to the bottom of a horribly deep trench. And the Lizardmen books.
You're getting interrupted again there. Hey, Josh, would the Fishmen be allies of the Vampire Coast? They both rock the POTC, Flying Dutchman dress code?
Pirate Caribbean.
Oh, of course, I'm an idiot. I have my wife's inability to pull apart an acronym. Ironesta and Noctilus should hire them. As I think we're going to get onto, Josh, the Fishmen, I think, are very much their own faction. They're very much their own people with their own needs, drives, and concerns. And their concerns are probably unlikely to match hand in hand with a bunch of crazed vampire pirates. But there might be links between them at some points. And also from Christopher there, thanks, Christopher. Any connections between Mathland and the Fishermen? I think that's also something that we'll get to, because there's a couple of nice stories concerning both Mathland and Stormfells, or Manan and Stormfells, and the birth of one of the species of fishmen that are out there. So we will get to that, because I think that's a really fascinating one. Yeah, totally. We will get to that.
We'll get there. Give us a second, guys.
Because that's super good. So we're back to Chapelotl.
Yeah. So Lokir Fellheart somehow, some way learns about this sunken city that's probably made out of gold or other some such nonsense, because lizardmen, and he decides to get a big expedition together to go check it out. And when I say big expedition, not only does he load up the Blessed Dread, his Black Ark, with like all the soldiery, he also hires quite a few sorceresses from Grond.
7 of them.
Yeah, which
7 of their most effective ones. That's not small stuff.
Yeah, no, he makes like a big old offering to the sorceresses and Marathi to get them on board.
In fact, just to try and provide that with a bit of context, I would like you to just take a moment to consider how many sorcerers were sent by the Phoenix King to help the Empire stave off an entire incursion of chaos, and what was the impact that they made. Only 3 were sent, and these were not the most powerful sorcerers that they had to hand. These were just 3 elven sorcerers. Now, one of them, of course, became the High Loremaster of the entirety of the thing, but nevertheless, still just 3. 7 of them!
Yeah. So these sorceresses go with Lokir to help him find Chapyotl, first of all. But when they find it, they cast a really, really big, powerful spell that essentially creates an air bubble around Lokir and his army, and he leads his army down. So he leads...
And not quite. It's not an air bubble. They can all breathe underwater. Slightly different, because they're swimming like madmen down there.
Yeah, so they can breathe. That's the important bit.
Yeah, they can breathe. That's the important bit.
They all work their way down and are also
yeah, they pretty much did.
Yeah, everybody loaded up on the magic school bus from the Black Ark. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks very much, Miss
Frizzle is a dark elf. There you go. You heard it here first. She's a hag sorceress, but they make their way down to the bottom of the trench, and it is a huge fight, because this wasn't just a warband of Corsairs. He unleashes the entire Black Ark of the Blessed Dread, which is one of the largest and most influential Black Arks. It's got monsters, it's got armies. I mean, these are floating fortress cities. It's not just a castle, it's way more than that. A lot of people don't really understand how big Black Arks are. They are fucking colossal and have tens of thousands of troops on them.
Yeah, in fact, they're so cool that I think us having a stream about them at some point definitely makes sense. Examining some of the Black Arks, also examining their initial roots. And again, I apologize for saying this, but all the way back to the Melibonians and good old Michael Moorcock, where they had the big, massive floating fortresses that the Melibonians wheeled out. So, yeah, that's definitely a future stream.
Yeah, so he unleashes everything he has. They all go down, and a huge fight breaks out where the fish people are so fishmen, whatever you want to call them, aboleths or chasm dwellers or whatever name you'd like. They are so powerful enough, and there's so many of them, that it is a genuine, drawn out, ugly fight. That the Dark Elves suffer quite a few casualties.
So I think it's worth interrupting just to make sure you get an idea of the fight that was down there, and also how fucking rock hard Lokir is. Because as he pops down there, he's fighting off against gigantic manta rays, which are dwarfing everything around them. And importantly, as it says multiple times, the local inhabitants that moved into it, these were not natural indigenous folk that had just sunk down with it, and they happened to be lizard men down there. It is definitely 100% not that. It was a group, a species that had moved into the ruins and had taken control of what was one of the most important cities of the lizard men. This is not a small thing. This is an important thing. It still had all of its sacred plaques in place, many ancient artifacts, and importantly, some ancient artifacts that predate the cataclysm. And again, if you want to know more about the cataclysm and all that nonsense, we have multiple streams where we've been discussing that in the past. There was all manner of awesome treasure and stuff for the Dark Elves to go raiding. Good old Dark Elf pirates.
Yes, so ultimately, the Dark Elves do win. They manage to scatter, the fishermen retreat, and they scatter them off. They sack Chapyotl and run. I
would say more that they got what they wanted and retreated themselves. there's no definite point that they can say that.
I would say the
destroyed them and
fish
drove them
people,
back.
maintain control of the city. Absolutely.
Absolutely. I'm not so sure they drove or even drove them away. The Dark Elves came down, they swamped the place, they did a needle attack, they grabbed what they wanted, and they fucked off fast, having fought some of the most monstrous creatures down there. So it's not so much that the Fishmen were defeated per se, it's that they had a lightning strike attack from the Dark Elves.
That's fair. Totally. And what? Where did Nurgle come from? Like,
I have no idea. Stay live. I love your question, but
how does it benefit? Though I will say, just a little fun thing about Nurgle when it comes to Fishmen. Nurgle has plague krakens in Warhammer Fantasy. They are horrifying creatures. They're very well established. They show up a lot. And Nurgle, funny enough, is often, weirdly enough, he's kind of the most major naval power of the Dark Gods because plague fleets come up a lot.
I adored my Plague Fleet for Manowar, the old game back in the day. The whole thing was gloss varnish for that special super icky, not yuckiness.
Yeah, if you like Rapunzel de Leoness, her big thing was that she defeated Karn the Blighted, who led a big old Plague Fleet.
I don't know if I want to press this comment, but I'm going to do it.
Rock hard, lusty fishwoman maid Todd Lokier Howard.
I mean, you tried.
You tried.
I mean, seriously,
he was clearly searching for it, but we'll give you small credit.
2 out of 10.
Yeah. So anyway, Lokier Fellheart. The really important thing for him in particular is that Lokier gets one special artifact, and this artifact, I don't know if anybody's going to agree with my assessment, but I don't believe this is a Lizardman artifact or even an Old One artifact. This is a Fishman artifact, which is that he gets the Kraken helm, his really awesome, crazy helmet. But what's really interesting is that when Lokier takes this thing and puts it on, he changes. Lokier is not like other Dark Elves at all anymore, really, in my opinion. I really like the way Total War kind of adapted to make him even more monstrous than he appears in his basic art, where his eyes are super fucked up. He's got glowing red eyes, like it's just black with red irises, and that's it. That's all that can be seen beneath his helm anymore.
Okay, so there's a couple of points to definitely confirm here because it says it directly in the text, so we're not just supposing here. So the people that he fought were quoted as an ancient underwater people that predated the old ones. And that's an important thing to say, and that's where the helm came from. They fought against gigantic squids, krakens, manta rays, all that business. That's all fun, and the fact that they said that it was importantly, there's another fact here that I think is worth bringing up, that they were descended from the people of Lustria. They mentioned that they were an aquatic people descended from the folk of Lustria, but they didn't explain what that meant. Generally, Lustria is equated with Lizardmen or the Old Ones. So you could say that it predated the fall of the Old Ones, and they almost certainly were a species created by the Old Ones, by that single quotation alone. They are almost certainly an ancient uplifted species from the Old Ones, and they had a purpose, and possibly the sinking of that city itself was a part of their purpose, bringing it down so that they could take control of it. Sadly for them, though, Lokier steals all their bloody plaques, because Lokier is a big pirate dick, and he comes in and steals all their stuff, which was quite amusing. It's also worth saying, though, that this city is also mentioned over on the Lizardman side, and it does again drop another couple of really useful snippets, because again, it states that the city has been taken over by an ancient hateful species, but here they say it makes forays up to the land when it's moonlit, with no moon at all now. So again, different descriptions, got slightly different versions of it. And they do moonless night raids to drag people down into the oceans again for whatever reasons and schemes that they have. Sounding a touch Fimmer in terms of their making raids to get people, if you wish. But definitely having quite a different tone to how the Dark Elves later very much gave them an entire civilization down there. Here they're portrayed in a more sinister light, but it is from the Lizardman side.
Yes, and Jonathan Scott, I resent that. I resent that. I do not. There is no Fishman body pillow. I should make one. I could probably sell that for money. But right now, there's not one. I do love Fishmen.
Thanks, Jonathan, you rock.
Yes, thank you. So what you have here is we have an ancient civilization. They have taken over, at the very least, they've taken over a fallen lizardman ruin. Though they've also been showing up in a lot of places, the old world, which implies that if they have an empire, it is huge. And
or it's multiple groups, in
Yeah,
that we are equating, say, Cathay with the Empire, in that they both are human, but they're very different groups. And it's very possible. You've got to remember, the oceans are freaking huge, far more ocean than there is land. The chances of them being just a single civilization down there, a monolithic group, is next to nil.
Yeah, I don't necessarily mean as much into civilization as more in like a series of species.
Yeah, I think that.
But furthermore, they have really, really powerful relics, very few of which have made their way up to the surface. And these things are game changers, where Lokir Felheart is legitimately one of the most terrifying entities on the ocean once he gets that helmet, because he can regenerate from damn near anything.
Yep.
We actually get like a big fight scene when he finally goes toe to toe with Sea Lord Aislan. Aislan functionally kills Lokir. Like, he literally if I recall correctly, I believe he just chops his throat like wide open. And by all rights, Lokir should have been dead, even almost by normal region rules, and he just patches back together instantly. Like, no problem whatsoever.
And I think that speaks to, probably, if you're looking to try and provide some context for this, to try and understand exactly what Lokir has, it's obviously a deeply important artifact to them, what he did yoink. And it's that being the case, it's generally created for one of two reasons for most Warhammer artifacts. One is religion, and the other one is magic. So either their magic allowed this to be created, or for some religious reason, the tentacled deity or something similar grants those sort of powers. And it gives you, if you're ever thinking of, I want to create Fishmen for my own background, you have your first, let's say, snippet of information to try and figure out what their cultural norms are, because we know what that mask looks like, we know what that mask does, and we know that that mask comes from them. So you can start going, well, what does that mean in terms of their culture?
Yeah, and the Kraken Helm, the other thing that's really interesting about it is that although we don't get a lot of great specifics, there is a lot of open space to interpret what it has done to Felheart physically and mentally. Because there is a shift in how dangerous he is and how particularly awful his raids are from the first time to the second time, where he, or pre and after, where he becomes debatably much worse afterwards, because that's really the start of his full legend. And leads to a lot of his more horrific escapades, like his raid on Cathay. That was so awful that the Cathayans didn't even resettle what he destroyed. They burned it to the ground and abandoned it because it was that bad.
Yeah, and I think that it's worth just generally stating that it's another example of where elves, when they get focused on a particular thing, tend to inhabit that thing, or if that thing comes upon them, it inhabits them. Elves are not like humans. They're far more emotional. They're far more into it, so to speak. And when something gets them even further into it, it tends to completely obsess, dominate, and change them. And I think this is a perfect example of a character that became much more because of that. And I think if I was, for example, creating this, I would most certainly pull it down the more religious side, perhaps a deity, perhaps something like that, because there's just too much there. It could even be something that the folk down below were attempting to protect and ensure did not escape. So there could be something horrific attached to it, something that they themselves are concerned about that they were trying to protect. There's lots of different types of stories you could build around this, largely because Lokir is awful. And
yeah.
And because he's so awful, you can use that as a point of, again, conflict. And whenever you're building stories and looking to create something cool, points of conflict and reasons for people to be pitched against each other is great. Having him as not just a bad guy, he's a dark elf, but a bad guy who's a dark elf who's becoming something else is super fun, because then we have the Fishmen going for him. For almost certainly to begin with, they're just trying to reclaim their artifact. Well, no, they're trying to reclaim his soul from the awfulness that's occurring to it. There's lots of different ways it could be spun. And that's, again, down to yourselves if you're out there, if you are on the role-playing side, for example.
Yes. So the last thing we need to talk about with the Dark Elves that ties into the Fishmen, which is when we're going to start getting into some really interesting shit, is the underground sea.
Yeah.
Which is that Nagaroth is kind of a weird continent because it is on top of basically a subterranean continent where Nagaroth has a bunch of tunnels that are all over the place and connected all throughout it. It's almost like something burrowed its way through Nagaroth in primordial times through all the oceans, because the kind of the Cthulhu, yeah. We can't say Cthulhu. What's the next best thing we can do, guys?
Oh no, you can't say Cthulhu because Cthulhu is not held by copyright anymore. It's outside copyright, so they could literally just use Cthulhu or Chthon or some similar name.
Yeah,
but yeah, it's not Cthulhu. It'd be lol of the Yeah, nice one, Mohammed. I'm probably right.
Well, we all know it actually would have been, they would have watched for a random British commercial about some local business and then tried to fuse it with Cthulhu to make the new name. But in any event, so the underground sea is that the kind of the Great Lake type area, that inner sea where all the actual Nagaroth cities are, connects through these underwater pathways all the way to the Boiling Sea in the west, the Great Ocean in the east, and even if you follow the correct tunnels through the Black Way, which leads you all the way down to Lustria. And it can pop you out around the various temple cities and even onto the Turtle Isles in the east, which is crazy. So like this is a huge expanse, and the Dark Elves use it to very great effectiveness. But what they note is that they have found ruins of a civilization down there, among among submerged depths. And well, those who survive have found ruins. There are also notes that entire fleets, ships, maybe even full-on Black Arcs have gone missing because they encounter other things. There are monstrous creatures down there, and perhaps not all of the ruins are truly ruins. Some of them may still be well inhabited. They're difficult to explore. And links between Fishmen, the Famir, not that are deliberately stated.
No, but there are many links that could be drawn.
Yeah. I will say Famir, bogs, marshes, mists, fens, and they're, kind of reptilian, ancient primordial race. Not that far of a jump from an underwater ancient primordial scaly race.
Yeah, totally. And I think that the best answer here is, if it's ever fully developed, the area is ripe to be developed, in that there almost certainly would be a link if anyone sat down and had a good think about it. But that doesn't mean that if it is developed, they'll do that. But I think I agree completely. It makes sense.
Yeah.
So much for that, by the way.
Yeah. So this underwater sea, the other thing that's really important about a lot of these ruins is that, from what can be told by what the Dark Elves kind of mention about it, is that they're primarily underwater. Like, it's not places the Dark Elves can easily move into because they're not good for people that live on land. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that there is a couple of important words to say for this section of undersea dwelling civilization folk. If we're looking for a clear run through towards Age of Sigmar, this is where the cavern dwellers come from. They are effectively cavern dwellers in the biggest cavern in the Warhammer world, which extends for thousands of miles and has an entire sea inside it. The Dark Elves should dominate down here. This is where they pull a lot of their early Cold Ones from. This is where the rumors of the troglodytes come from. This is where all manner of horrendous creatures were shipped out of. The big sea dragons that they use, many of them were captured from down here, not just over in the oceans. But in more than one source, it says quite clearly that there is a growing concern amongst the Dark Elves, and they're sending scouts and shades and all the rest down there to try and find more about it, that there's not just an old ruined civilization, which doesn't really interest them that much at all, except for the possibility of stealing other things like the good old iron circlet that Malekith has. There's a growing concern that it's not just ruins, that there's an entire civilization, and it's big, like proper big, bigger than theirs big. and it's sitting underwater. It's down there, and it's basically protecting itself and keeping itself secret from elsewhere. Games Workshop were very clearly setting up a new faction. There is no doubt that a new faction was very carefully seeded. Doesn't mean that they ever needed to use that. It was just there in the same way that they never used this. It never used Astalia or Araby. There's other locations that are constantly referred to in the text that never get any further detail. But here it is very clear. We have ourselves an entire faction that is sitting over in Lustria that has never ever been detailed. There's probably also going to be factions above ground as well, because Lustria's and North and with the Nagaroth and all the rest of the new world, so to speak, is huge.
Thousands of miles of empty.
And most of it is empty. So there's definitely other civilizations there. There's lots of development ground, but this isn't there's a big empty space. What will we put in it situation where when we theorize about what's out there, can go, well, there's a big space there that hasn't been detailed. Games Workshop could fill that. This is a big empty space that they've filled. And they have filled it with a civilization of underwater cavern dwelling fish folk, because they are mentioned at one point again with the big pointy teeth and the webbed hands. They are definitely down there, and they're associated with the dragons, they're associated with the cold ones, they're associated with all of the lizardine stuff, which again is quite closely associated through with the old ones in general. So the idea that they're a part of the old ones plan is very clearly seeded through the dark elf sections of the lore. There is a surprising amount about the old fishmen out there, even though sometimes it's only a sentence here and a sentence there, because simply by stating civilization and alongside this creature, that creature, you immediately start building this larger picture of not just a group that might exist, but one that does, what it's associated with, the fact it's got a culture, the fact that it's tied to being a descendant of the old ones somehow. It's big stuff. The conspiracy is real. The tinfoil hat should come off.
yeah. Hammond is, what is this? Is the Great Red Chaos Whale. The Great Red Chaos Whale.
Fishman. It's the Fishmen related. I can't remember the Great Red Chaos Whale. Oh God,
yeah, can you include a context clue? Yeah, or a source? Yeah.
Sorry, Hammond, if I spot your comment coming up, I'll bring it up again. Sorry for not knowing that.
We'll keep that. We'll keep an eye out for that.
That was annoying me.
But yes, the Charybdis is also
it's a part of a quest in Total War. So I
part of a quest in Total War for the
Total War is not my big area. I just get to look smugly in that direction.
Chaos War. I have a pretty good memory for all of those. Y'all, okay, a little more specifics. Come on, more than the breadcrumbs. No, it shouldn't be a Norscan hunt.
How would the fishmen interact with the merworms?
So merworms would probably just be a creature, a species they interact with, a species that would debatably be part of their roster, especially.
This is worse.
Oh yeah, it's back on you now. Yes, not on me.
I don't remember the Great Red Chaos Whale. It's clearly a section I didn't write. God damn, I'm going to go and pick that one up. Do I have it here? I don't have it here.
Hammond, give it. I'll look it up.
You can look it up at your side. Yeah, that was amusing.
So, one thing that's really interesting is there are several. Another idea that could link to this is that Forge World actually expanded the species of merworm. So there are several types. And there are three different types. There's the abyssal merworm, the umbral merworm, and the paleo worm, something like that. And what's interesting is only one of the types is associated with the high elves, because the high elves usually have a big thing with merworms, where one of the types is said to live primarily around Ulthuan, but they talk about that. I want to say it's the paleo worm, the skileo worm, or whatever. Is that one of them lives in the deepest, darkest depths, to the point where it is forever cloaked in shadow. And if the fishmen were considering that they seem to have an extreme aversion to sunlight, to the point where they don't even really like to come out.
Just bring that one up there. It's page 35 in the Tomb of Salvation.
Cool. I will be looking that up as soon as I finish talking about this.
There was also a cheer there. Let me just bring that one up too.
So I would say that there would probably be some species of merworms that would be very heavily associated with the fishmen, but they would probably be mostly working with the absolute bottom depth. Like, you know, in our world, when you get to that part of the ocean where it's so dark that the creatures just get fucking weird, that would be Fishman territory. They probably wouldn't be running around with your things above that part of the ocean as much. But the things below that would probably be very, very strongly associated.
I'm also going to pull on a bit there from the Monstrous Arcanum because it's got a quotation that I think gently applies because of its abyssal quotation. But before I do that, I'll say Gun for Bullets. Thanks very much, Gun for Bullets. Are there any humans with fish-like features in fantasy beyond mutants? Not really. There's lots of mutants that do. There's lots of groups that have fish-like appearances that could be mistaken for fishmen. But there's not a solid species like, say, beastmen that are purely fish-like. There are some that are amphibians. There's frog-like over in Bretonia.
Yeah, I was gonna say you have the lakemen.
The lakemen, which are frog-like, and I think are worth bringing up at some point too. They were not necessarily written as cleanly as they could have been. That was by David Chart for Knights of the Grail. There's certainly a detail or two from there that could be done. But broadly speaking, beyond mutation, the answer there is, as it stands, not really, other than the fishmen themselves. And I'm going to say one other thing before we get to our page 35 point. And that's that in the Monstrous Arcanum, there's a lovely little description of, what was it called? The Howling Abyss, as I recall. The Howling Abyss. And in the center of the Howling Abyss, which is on the... it's the Isle of Grief. Oh my goodness, it's really throwing me there. So on the Isle of Grief, and in the center there's a great big green and black basalt pillar that's half underwater, and is associated with fishmen also. And in particular, I imagine probably the abyssal merworms as well, which is definitely worth bringing up. Indeed, may even be one of the sources for it. The best thing about this one is, though, that it is absolutely redolent with magic. It predates the old ones in the Cataclysm. So we're talking a proper ancient site. It's covered with text and pictograms that no one locally can read. It's by Tilia, down by the Tilian side, and is also associated locally with the local rumors of things like sirens. And the sirens are effectively fishmen. They're fishmen under another name. And we'll be discussing the siren fishmen a little bit later because they're in another completely different group. And they are seen in multiple oceans in slightly different ways, and there's loosely two breeds of them, which we will get to in a moment. Doom Rider also brings up, could the lizardmen have been a force evolved from the primordial fishmen? I think that there is certainly, thank you very much for that, by the way, Doom Rider, pardon me. There is certainly a link between the lizardmen and the fishmen as to what that is.
Yeah, we will get to a conspiracy section in a little bit, and we're also going to talk
a little bit about... dive all over that bad boy. We definitely will.
I'm glad y'all are so eager. We really appreciate it.
I'm going to bring up Chris's one as well before you do your page. How well does water function as a medium for chaos magic? We know that the earth is not effective, but it's interesting if water is the opposite. The earth is effective. It's only effective for certain winds. The same is the case for the oceans. Extremely effective for the jade wind, for example, which is all over the place. The grey wind is quite heavily around the oceans as well. So it's just different is the answer there, Chris. Go check out our Winds of Magic stream if you want to get an idea of how that can be applied, because we do discuss each of the different
we actually delved in
to some degree. Yeah, we did do that pretty well. Thanks very much though for that, Chris. Super appreciated. Mr. Peg, we've got another 2 to go. So you're saying that there could have been gigantic bugs similar to the giant isopods in our world?
Listen, there are bug people. We don't have time for it. They're bug people.
They definitely are, Mr. Peg. They exist, and there's also spider people. But yeah, let's move on to Matu there. Are you saying there's a Fishman iceberg with most of it below the surface?
There's the door. Get out.
And yes,
there's a little hole in the wall here. That's where you go. Get out.
Okay, page whatever it was. Was it 45? 35.
Yes, so page 35. It's a Captain Ahab reference. So Captain Aber Walblatt. Captain Walblatt is a well-known member of the Knights Mariner, and the tales of his exploits are told throughout the coastal regions of the old world. It is not the prowess or devotion of these legends tell of, but at the quest Walblatt has tirelessly devoting himself for nigh on a decade for the past 9 years since the last ill-fated voyage of the Templar warship Manon's Triton, of which Walblatt is the only survivor. He's hunted the great red chaos whale that wrecked his ship and killed his crewmates. Walblatt, now captain of his own warship, Manon's Scale, refuses to set foot ashore until he has enacted his revenge on that whale, his devotion commanding near fanatical loyalty from his crew. I regret nothing. Yes, the Great Chaos Whale. I would say that's probably a behemoth. Would be my guess.
Itself. In the same way, you don't naturally associate everything that lives on land with every civilization that lives on land. Everything that lives in the water is not necessarily associated with fishermen, but they could very well be their antagonists, or perhaps, as you suggest, maybe even connected. But most of the time, they're going to be discreet.
I looked it up because it was bothering me. Merworms, you got regular merworms, tend to be with the high elves. You got pago worms hang around Nagaroth, and they're the really cold ones. But then there's the skeel worms, and the skeel worms are the really deep trench, nasty, scary ones that have a perpetual darkness around them. Those ones I would say are fishmen associated. As is like the Charybdis. The Charybdis would also be fishmen associated.
Definitely. Or because we're definitely looking at the point of potentially building up multiple factions here. The Charybdis are definitely associated with the cavern dwelling ones, I would suggest, because they're most certainly ones that would be going up and under. So definitely.
Bretonnia and all their fleets meet the Fishman.
Fishmen win. There's only one fishman. One fishman per fishman.
Only one.
Sitting there with his big pointy teeth.
He has to deal with
his big bug eyes. Oh no!
He has to deal with all the Bretonians.
Thank you so much,
Very
Mandatus. You absolutely rock. Thank you so much. I take it there's no documented encounters between fish folk and the good Dawi. You'd be wrong. Though counting for some in fact, I can think of two just off the top of my head for some undocumented sub losses. Indeed. There is a sub attached to that as well. Also, thanks to the Warhammer mod for Bannerlord's semi-heretical Bretonian county roads exist.
Country roads. Of course, yeah, Bretonia would have country roads, though sung in a French accent and probably way just awful.
So we're going to get to it, but yes, the dwarves have encountered the fishmen. It's happened more than once. There's a couple of tales that mention that I can think off the top of my head, and one of which is pretty recent as well.
Yeah, I'll give you an easy one. Go read Gotrek and Felix to the Serpent Queen. Gotrek and Felix literally talk about they were with Long-Drong Slayer pirates and they got stuck on the bottom of the ocean fighting fishmen. It's fucking
all right.
hilarious.
I'll give you another one because that one is hilarious. And yes, go read it because it is funny. White Dwarf number 307 mentions a dwarf engineer whose name is... I can't remember his name. It's something like Steel something or another. Steelhammer, perhaps? Anyway, he's a dwarf engineer, and he's with a bunch of Estalian privateers. And they also go diving down to the bottom of the ocean. And they find themselves unexpectedly assaulted by, again, sharp-toothed, webbed-fingered fishmen from down at the bottom of the ocean. As I say, Games Workshop was seeding this again and again and again. This wasn't something that was just being done as almost as an aside. This was something that was being done so that if they ever wanted to pick it up, they definitely could.
Yeah, and plus, like, Barak Var, ain't no way there's not dwarves constantly grumbling about fishermen there, and all the other Dawi think they're completely insane, but they know. They know.
Yeah, particularly when you consider how slightly peeved Gotrek, Long-Drawn Stroke, Felix were about the whole thing. They were like, at least there won't be fishmen this time, because quite frankly, they were awful.
Yeah. So we were talking about...
Where are you now?
Yeah, so Andy had like a really good speech before we appreciate all the super chats, but we kind of got off track there for a little bit.
Very much appreciate the super chat.
All of the Fishman Empire and stuff. But what's even more horrifying and really helps us set up for Halloween is that what we're about to talk about, there's very strong evidence that there's at least some part of the Fishmen, whether you want to see them as a race or a civilization, that is expanding. Which is that the High Elves have been talking about that they've been experiencing recent, really concerning news that something is expanding into Ulthuan, because back during the Sundering, when the Sundering finally kind of ended, like the actual event of the Sundering happened, all these big tidal waves came and slammed into the outer kingdoms of Ulthuan. And a lot of Ulthuan sank, and just awful. It was awful just all around. Now, some of the kingdoms of Ulthuan on the eastern shore, I forget exactly which kingdom it is, but one of the kingdoms is renowned for having a lot of underground caverns. These beautiful, where they built a lot of their cities. They have all these beautiful cities built under the ground, which you normally wouldn't associate with elves, but they built like they're almost like dwarfy elves because they built underground. And they were
It's Tyrannoch.
Yeah, Tyrannoch. Yeah, and they have all these like absolutely gorgeous things, but because of the tidal wave that came in, the vast majority of the cities already being underground, the waves came in and like thousands of Kothic. Yeah, Kothic's the one I'm specifically talking about.
Yeah, it's the one you think
also got fucked up.
Mandatus, I am building Thunderers from a Bar-related army during the stream. Most delightfully useful, and thank you. I'm glad that we're providing you some interesting inspiration.
Yes. What they talk about in Kothic in particular is that a lot of these caverns are full of water. Like full of tons, like we're not talking about like a little bit of water. We're talking about like they're full of like lakes now. And the High Elves very desperately want to, especially those that are from Kothic and are descended from that kingdom, want to go into these places and try and reclaim what they can.
Thanks, Joe.
Thanks, Joe. We appreciate that. They would love to go. There's like tons of treasure there, or family artifacts, art, various powerful relics. There are all sorts of things they would love to reclaim, but they're beginning to run into concerns that they can't because some people that are going down there aren't coming back. Yeah. And they're beginning to find evidence that lots of something has been moving in to these caverns that have been sunk and is like basically taking over these old high elf ruins and starting to live there. And it's basically extremely heavily implied that these some version of these fishmen have discovered these underwater cities that have been abandoned by the high elves and are now moving in, which is very alarming, extremely alarming news, especially because the high elves, they don't have the population and really the means to deal with yet another invasion. Like so much of Ulthuan is kind of empty because there's just not that many high elves anymore. And someone else moving in is kind of a natural consequence of this, but also a very frightening prospect for the high elves.
It is. Yeah. So, loosely speaking, we're now looking at multiple iterations of our fishmen popping up in various sources. They've been seeded throughout the editions, all the way from the beginning of Warhammer up to 8th edition, but we're still not done. There are still several examples of the fishmen that are popping up, and also in different kinds, because it's very easy to just get stuck and fixated upon the pointy-toothed, black-eyed, horrendous-looking fishmen types that get mentioned again and again. But the Warhammer world has more than one example of a fishman type, because we also have, after all, our merfolk. And merfolk are half fish, half man, and they pop up not just once or twice, but again and again and again at different points, to the point that one of the most famous cities in the old world, Marienburg, has as its actual heraldry a mermaid, in this particular case, sitting quite clearly and associating them closely with Manan, the god of the seas, because the merfolk are considered to be blessed servants in some respects of Manan. So we have yet again another in potential society of merfolk, I suppose, fish folk that are living down there. But when you look into the deeper lore for the merfolk, there's actually two kinds, not one.
Yes, well, actually, we'll get into
at least
more kinds. Yeah. With how big the ocean is it possible there's as much action going on below as in the? Oh yeah, absolutely. I wouldn't say it's possible. It just is. Like it would be busy down there, especially like you have to think there's all sorts of weird things that happen down there as far as large swaths of magic are drawn to the ocean. There could have been warpstone meteors that impacted the ocean and sank to the bottom and are having an effect on things down there. There's all sorts of crazy shit going on down there. The more you think about it.
All of the games that have been made for Warhammer are, broadly speaking, on land or on the surface of the sea, meaning that what lies beneath is not ever anything that really matters. So, for example, if you go over to Dreadfleet, which was the most recent version of the Warhammer at Sea, Dreadfleet mentions the fishmen in more than one case. There's several cards that can literally draw fishmen up from the depths to do boarding actions against your ships. And again, the same descriptions pop up again and again. So it's not something that was happening by mistake. Whoever was writing these was drawing upon similar sources each time. Now, sometimes they will have independently done this. They just simply thought, what will the fishmen be like when I make them? But broadly speaking, they're all drawing from that same broadly humanoid, big, dark, bug-eyed, huge spine-like teeth that are coming from their mouths, webbed hands and claws that come up.
Pale scales.
They've one place they're dark, so I think that you're going to get a nice mixture.
Okay.
But pale does work. I think if
not
you're
a lot of sunlight.
Yeah, totally. There's not a lot of sunlight, but then look at fish. They come in all different sorts of colors when they're down there. So broadly speaking, we're definitely dealing with the same thing, but Dreadfleet mentions them in more than one place. So they are defo there, and there's definitely a lot happening. And if you're at sea, you do get attacked by them, because the only examples we have of sea games have the merfolk coming and have them attacking you.
Yep. And the scariest thing is that a lot of evidence suggests that they aren't coming up to eat people. They're coming up to capture people.
Yeah, it's weird.
I love it. Worse. Like Andy talked about the story about their submersibles, where they're noted to have these Kraken things that have like ships on the back. So like almost a shell, but it opens and people can go in and out of it. They were taking people into the shell so they wouldn't drown, and then taking them back down below the depths. Why?
You can say. And if we go back to the very original description of the merfolk, it's quite clear that they are aquatic. They can come in and out of the water. So they are not just simply going to be in the water. They can survive in air as equally as they can survive in water, which means that we don't have, for example, the issues that the Fishmen of the Marvel Cinematic Universe had, where they had to wear nice masks so they could go above ground. We don't have that problem here. They can go above ground, they can capture what they want and sink their way back down to the depths, dragging you with them. And very possibly they have methods of keeping you alive. Maybe they are also like the Skaven, a slave-keeping race, or like the Dark Elves, or maybe they're doing something more sinister.
Yep. And
I'm just going to bring that comment up because it made me laugh. They want our lungs.
I need the lungs. You humans are wasting them. Give them to us. But so like Andy said, we do of course have the various forms of merfolk, where you have your mermaids, which there are different versions of mermaids. Some of them are described as being very similar, or like almost like cousins to harpies, where they're more animalistic. They don't seem to necessarily possess like a lot of higher intellect, but they do have the ability to sing and lure people to them. And if you get close enough, you realize that their visage is quite horrific, and they will eat you. They will just full on eat you, and it's going to be a bad time.
Loosely speaking, there's a relatively clean division in that there are some that are most clearly bestial and that prey upon people. And they're often called sirens. There's definitely versions of the sirens down by Tilia. There's also some up in Kislev. They've got their own name there. Can I remember? I think I even noted it down somewhere. Let me just check. Yeah, the Ruskalki. Ruskalki, pardon me, up in Kislev. They're basically just sirens under another name. They're almost
Sartosa has like a whole island of them.
Yeah, absolutely. There's the Isle of Sirens. The Isle of Sirens down there. But there's a second set of sirens which are far more like the classical, almost Greek version of them, where they are considered to be beautiful. We're not talking feral beauty, which some of the ones that are preying upon them tend to have a sort of feral beauty that you can look at and go, I can see there's something attractive under there somewhere. Oh boy, I could exactly. But actually beautiful individuals, both male, female. And they also have the siren song, and they're also closely associated with harpies, and thus one argues potentially due to dark elves too. There's also a particularly strong myth. It comes up in more than one place. There's a 4th edition mention of it, and I think there's a 2nd edition mention of it as well, where they try to justify, as in the species that are on land, try to justify where these creatures have come from. And they fall back on the myth. I will quickly just stop. Kidnap people. So are there any Sigmarite fishmen? There might be some down there.
Who knows? Maybe there's a warrior priest who proselytizes to the ocean and got a merfolk audience.
So I think this is actually a super fascinating question, Song of Power. So where would you basically ground them as a faction? And personally, I'd say multiple places. Beside Tilia makes a lot of sense. There's tons of stories from there. Over by the Fallen Lizardman city, which I always forget the name of. Chup
Yodel, yeah.
Thank you very much, Chup Yodel. That makes sense. Kislev's got a bunch. The Dark Elves, however, I think make a better option down by their sunken seas up there. So having them coming out perhaps in the boiling ocean over there, I think that would work quite well.
I would if I were drawing a map, I would kind of do what they did with like the old Beastman maps, where I would show a global map and I would have like points of interest that have like lines squiggling out that shows like where they're kind of mainly focused. And my points would be the underwater sea or the underground sea for the Dark Elves, or for Nagaroth. Chup Yodel as being a big capital. I would do, is it the Cliff of Squalls over by like Skavenblight, Talea, and Nostalgia that has like a bunch of caverns and stuff in it. I'd probably do around there, and then I'd probably also do the Sea of Claws, and last probably like the Black Gulf. That would kind of be my 5-point fish pentagram that's not actually a pentagram because it doesn't map out right.
This is actually quite interesting, Abyss Walker. Is there any trace of undead fishermen, and have they come out of the Maelstrom? What I particularly like about this one is that we actually have a little bit of crossover here, where you've got the sirens that aren't sirens and sirens that aren't sirens, and it's just worth mentioning to make sure you don't get them confused if you are playing Total War game. I'm pretty sure that was Total War 2, because I even remember this because I played that game. So we're talking undead spirits that are floating across. They are definitely not fishmen, nor are they sirens in the traditional sense, but are worth mentioning. I am not aware of any strong ones, but there's far more undead stuff on the Total War side, so it's possible.
Yeah. So what I would say is that when it comes to the Maelstrom, would there be undead fishermen there? Yes, because the Maelstrom draws in anything that dies in sea. Well, anything that dies in sea, so it would draw them in, and it has because
unless
of the way
they have a way out of it.
Yeah. It could be, but I want to say there might be an event card for them in the actual Dreadfleet game, which would imply that they're there.
There's an event card for them where they come swarming up, and they're described as having. There is an event card, and they do a boarding action, and they're described as having brine coming out between their needle-like teeth, as I recall.
Yeah. Now, whether or not they were drawn there because they're undead, or whether that's just a place where they show up naturally, or were drawn to, who could say? Yeah. But anything that dies and goes to the Maelstrom tends to end up being undead because of the way Noctilus corrupted it. So if they die and their bodies end up there, they would be there. So I would say it's more than likely they're there, but probably not in like, crazy numbers, so to speak. But the other thing, oh gosh, what were we just talking about?
I was about to do the two different breeds.
Right, the undead thing. So yes, like Andy was saying, you have sirens, which are they are banshees at sea. That's what a siren is. It's a banshee at sea. Then you have your sirens, which Andy talked about earlier, and then you have mermaids, which like there's not an easy distinction between them. Like in my mind, I tend to probably think of sirens are probably the more intellectually elevated, and then mermaids are going to be your more harpyish bestial ones, to try and make it a little easier in my head, but the sources have never been consistent on that.
They're not consistent, but there is a source. There's two sources that I can think of that do give a birthing of where they came from, and it's probably nonsense because it's almost certainly made by people on land, but it is worth being aware of. And that's that once there was a naiad of great beauty. Now, if you don't know your naiads, I actually
there's naiads, which
naiads are not what some writers seem to think they are. Naiads are river spirits, not sea spirits. Sea spirits are myriads, but that's neither here nor there because some people use naiads as myriads. Anyway, you got your nereids, you got your naiads. That doesn't matter. And this beautiful naiad, who looks somewhat like a watery elf, attracts the attention of Mathlan or Manan, depending on how you put it. They have kids, and they are the mermaids. They are the sirens. However, Mathlan stroke Manan thought he was the only one that she was having relations with, but this was not true. She was also with Stromfels, and they created the far more bestial, far more shark-like, far more awful mermaids and sirens. So you got two breeds that came from two different divine sources and a naiad source. Now, the naiads are very briefly worth discussing as well, because they are, strictly speaking, also of the sort of creature that we're dealing with, which is sentient, underwater, and definitely in the background. And I can say they're definitely there because I freaking wrote this one myself, so I know that they are there. Now, I added this in like we're talking the early noughties, 2000, 2003, 2004, somewhere around there, for second edition Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. They were added to try and add a little bit of extra depth to the elven institutions that existed in the old world before they withdrew. And the only institutions that really had any depth inside the primary army lists were the Wood Elves at that point. That was it. But they were high elves. They were all elves, strictly speaking, not even high elves, because they hadn't split up into the different kiths or kins, depending how you want to language that. And they had lots of different spirits, not just the tree spirits that they were dealing with. The naiads were added, and they were very much akin to the dryads, but they were associated with rivers rather than trees. And the important thing to remember about these things is that they're also shapeshifters. They also look like elves when they're in their natural form. They are mostly female in appearance, although that does not necessarily mean that they are not male. There are several stories that related with them. Primarily, elves married them. They had relationships with them. They were entities that had been there for thousands of years, and the elves came in. It re-pitched the stories with the elves a little bit, but dwarves also have a couple of stories. There's a nice one with, and I'm going to quote this one because it always amused me when I wrote it. Dwimelson's personal book of grudges. May they all be boiled in oil. And they state concerning the naiads, bloody elves get their fingers into everything. A bit of a sexual connection there. Had to abandon the ships yesterday as they stopped floating. Bloody river spirits. You get the idea. So the naiads are real, but equally so are the nereids. So they're water spirits of the sea. So they might have got a little bit confused in some of the tellings, but we have got ourselves spirits of the ocean that the elves would be communing with, and they are almost certainly connected to the gods. And the idea that they had their own special little species down there isn't just something that is hinted at, it's directly stated in the text, and they make it quite clear that the siren stroke mermaids came from them. So we might be looking at basically now 3 complete and discrete groups. You've got your siren stroke mermaids that come in at least 2 breed types. You've got yourself the cavern dwelling civilization that's over in Nagaroth that is truly huge. And you've got yourself your fishman civilization, which most certainly has reached all the way up to Lustria and could be elsewhere. So we're on to our 3rd very clear group of fishmen that definitely exist in the Warhammer world.
Yeah, and to add some kind of further examples for like the naiads, they are explicitly brought up as well in the 8th edition army books, because they're brought up as being the servants of the lady. So the Lady of the Lake, you can kind of see as like her quote unquote lesser demons are interpreted as naiads, and they are sent as her messengers to go talk to the wood elves or to show up along particular lakes or rivers to do things for her.
Okay, now I check up with you, lesser demons, divine servants.
Just to give it, it's a appropriate comparison. Get off my ass, Andy. But there is there's also like Araby has a lot of talk about the nereids, but they're called sea nymphs from the Araby perspective.
Before I bring up Song of Powers comment as well, if we actually look at the lore, though, that makes complete sense. Now, I'm obviously delighted that they picked up the naiads and continued with it, because I popped them back into the setting. I was super pleased with that. But if you take a look at what the Lady of the Lake actually is, let's just say that she might be an elf, an elfy goddess. Depending on which version of the lore, depending on which version of the lore you go with, we have slightly different versions of which one. Doesn't really matter. But the naiads are basically super powerful ancient elf-like spirits, so they would be working hand in hand. It's not so much that they're divine spirits; they're friends, they're allies. It makes complete sense to tie the two together. So I'm really pleased that that's where that went.
Also, everyone, please join my public petition to get naiads as a Total War unit for Bretonia, please. Thank you. Song of Power. So if you guys did a campaign book for the Fishmen race, would that involve introducing them to the Warhammer world? What would be the plot hook? Oh man, I don't know if Andy would agree with my. Okay, so this is gonna get into my conspiracy, which it's almost time for that. Like, I'm gonna go full fucking off the wall here in a little bit.
I'm looking forward to this bit, because I'm gonna warm my hands on the conspiracy.
If you know. So I will give my version of that here in just a minute. So Stay
So
tuned.
loosely speaking there, if we did a campaign book, if I did a campaign book for Fishmen, it would be complicated. It wouldn't be simple. It wouldn't be just here are the very simple one breed of Fishmen type. You'd be looking to build something interesting, in depth, which had lots of internal conflicts, not monolithic civilizations, but things that had their own internal politics, needs, wants, desires, and that were following upon from the seeds that had already been sown in Warhammer to show that they have concerns with things on land that they want to get to, that they want to take for one reason or another, probably for some of them for the old one reasons, other because they're just pissed off and greedy, other because of whatever reason they might have. And that gives you all the hooks to drag them into all the other armies, to get them into fights, to get them on land, to perhaps change your army so that you can have naval battles or fish or coastal battles that are a little bit different. And that'd be super fun too. Long story short, complicated.
Yeah. Also, if you're like, oh man, I would love to see like more Fishman stuff, but like from official source, the new Lustria book for Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 4th edition, which I like most of it. There are problems I have with certain bits of it, but it has a lot of Fishman shit in it. Like there's a full-on Isle of the Dead reference, like Relia from the Cthulhu mythos. That is just full-on in it. The City of the Dead is just full-on part of Lustria now. So if you want, you can go check that out. It's a fun read.
Hey Joe, glad to see
Josie.
you there. Hello, hope the streams go well. Blinkin is very much enjoying the lore. Will I do writing? Give me adult money was a horrible idea. No, I think it was a great idea to give it back to me. Love it.
All right, so we've talked about spirits. We've talked about hybrids. We've talked about weird things that live down there. There's one other group as far as hybrids go that I think, well, I don't know if they count as mutants or divine servants or hybrids. We need to talk about the Sharkmen.
Sharkmen and Stromfells in general, I suppose.
Yes. Yes. Which, yeah. So there is a super duper famous creature that gets brought up a lot because they had a really strong feature in a Go Trek and Felix book that made them very popular as kind of the big bad. And they also just appear in various fun little bits, especially when Marienburg ever gets brought up, that sometimes you will get a cult of Stromfells in a port city often. And when that happens, sometimes, if you're very lucky or unlucky, depending on how you look at it, you will be gifted from Stromfells a Sharkman.
Sharkman!
Yeah, which is exactly what it sounds like. It is a huge guy that has shark features. So usually a shark head, and they're usually ripped and way bigger than a regular human has any right to be. Yeah, or where? Street sharks for anyone that grew up in the 90s cartoons. Yeah.
It's also worth saying that Stromfells, just in case you didn't know, he's a god of wrecking ships and sharks and the awfulness of the sea. Stands as a direct enemy to the standard god Mathlan or Manan, depending on where you are in the old world generally, and with the high elves and the dark elves. And Stromfells super nasty, but some of the Stromfells' divine capabilities not only give you access to these things, but allow you to turn into one as you go proper snappy. I even referenced this in one of me Lorehammer streams, where a cultist of Stromfells gets an entire tidal wave rushing through the sewers, and a spectral shark comes running through it because Stromfells. So yeah, yet another example of a fishman, although a very different type of fishman to the rest.
Yeah. What's interesting is that the Sharkmen of Stromfells, to my knowledge, don't tend to actually much appear at sea. They usually almost appear as sort of a mutant or a divine child that kind of like centralizes a cult that appears usually within a city somewhere. Marienburg had a huge problem with one of those very recently, that there was a full-on group of Sharkmen almost in a cult there, which most civilized society do not like Stromfells. He's very, very illegal to worship in most places.
Hey, Cole. I mean, they sort of did, but they often misname them as just naiads because they're not quite aware of what the difference between, say, Oceanids, Nereids, or whatever are. So, loosely speaking, yes, but under different names. But they are generally associated with the gods, as is not really that surprising, and generally associated with either Stromfells or Manan broadly. I can't think of any examples where they're not, actually. So yes, that's where they're associated with the closest connection being to the elves as a species.
And Games Workshop naming things like, have y'all ever thought about how silly it is that it's called a Charybdis, even though it's clearly based on Scylla?
Like, don't get me started.
Did that?
I mean, do not get me started.
Why do they do that? So this is actually a good point by Hawk that I just kind of want to bring up, that I would agree with this, that the Sharkmen, in my opinion, the Sharkmen to Stromfells to me feel like the children of Ulrich to Ulrich.
Yeah, I think that's probably the best way to view them as well, because they are so closely associated, not just with Stromfells, but with its cult. It does lead to that conclusion. In the same way that, for example, that the sirens that have got bestial bottoms that aren't fish. So, for example, octopuses or like birds, they're strongly associated with Stromfells as well, but they're associated as kids of Stromfells with Nereids or Naiads or whatever. So quite clearly, Stromfells, like Manan, is known for putting it about a bit. So the idea that his kids come across this way is, I don't think, a great shock, and I quite like the idea of it. And I think it's certainly something that for the servants of the god, they would seek to promote, because it makes their god more personal, more real, more direct, and that works really nicely.
All right, and then the final thing worth talking about, I think, is before I go off on my thing, is the last big guy in the sea that I really think should be hit on as far as talking about fish people, which is Triton, of course. Triton is basically like, I don't even think calling him a greater demon is appropriate. He's bigger than a greater demon, really. He is the god of the sea, but he is a physical entity. Sort of, kind of.
Yeah, sort of. Okay, so Triton was first added in
Man of War.
Yeah, Triton was first added in Man of War. Man of War was a game that was released by Games Workshop back in the early 90s, and it was the high seas battle game, and it actually is a classic. It's better than most of the games it has released just now. A truly great game. And in one of its expansions, it had a host of monsters, including most of the monsters from the deep that we now know today, actually. And one of them was Triton, and Triton was basically just Poseidon. Here's Poseidon. He's just turned up and he's going to sink your ship. They didn't really give much of a background or detail as to exactly what the hell Triton was, where he came from, how he should be used. What the hell does he do inside Warhammer? Who cares? He's a big, massive man who looks like Manan that's going to sink your ship. And that's all they cared about. The art came out, and there's a lovely bit where there's a ship and there's Triton wrapped around it about to destroy it. He's that freaking big. Later on, other writers picked this up, including myself. I dropped a mention of Triton into the Tome of Salvation, for example. Jody McGregor, he dropped it into the Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay Companion second edition.
He got a stat line that was buggers.
and probably wasn't high enough even there. And loosely speaking, has popped up again and again, and each time slightly differently pitched, but almost always tied directly to Manan as a physical manifestation of the god of the sea, someone who rises up and works with, is in sympathy with the god of the sea. But they give very little details as to the creation, as to exactly how it came there, and that's up to individual people to come up with their own stories as it currently stands. But Triton is definitely there, is definitely connected to Manan, is almost certainly connected to a host of underwater species, probably the more intelligent mermaidy types, probably, because there's at least one description of him swimming along with them in tow, like thousands of them. He just doesn't come by himself. And Triton was said to have bowed to Magnus the Pious when he went down to Marienburg. So he went down to Marienburg to basically say, "Oi, Marienburg, give us your troops. I'm about to pop over to Kislev. Come on." And Triton came to say, you know what, this Magnus guy, definitely legit. He's the one you should be listening to. He rose out of the waters in Marienburg and he looked down and went, "Yes." So everyone said, hey, this Magnus guy must be legit. Definitely wasn't an illusion. Definitely was real.
Yeah, and there are two other things about Triton that I think are worth mentioning, which is that A, Triton talks, but nobody understands what he's saying. Not even it's said that he speaks a language no one understands. Even the elves don't know it, which is saying a lot. That it's some either very specific underwater civilization language, or maybe it's such an old language that nobody else remembers how to speak it, which is also kind of sad that he may be the only person that speaks a language. That would actually be really depressing because literally no one understands him. But the other thing is that he seems to have a genuine vested interest in protecting a very specific way of living on the sea, because he targets black arcs and dark elves. The cruelty that they inflict on the creatures of the sea, because they often enslave like sea monsters to serve as pulling the black arcs around, like they chain them to the bottom of their vessels and stuff. Triton has full on destroyed a black arc. Like he came up from underneath and just skewered it and then dragged it underneath the waves, and it was a whole thing. Yeah, a lot of cool stuff there. So
I'm going to do a little part here as well, because I am aware of this, but I don't like bringing up those stats because they're so. Did I bring up the right one? Yes, I did. Because they're so bloody weak. I've got PCs that could take him easily. That makes absolutely no sense in the slightest. Yeah, his stats were less than ideal in terms of representing something of his extraordinary size.
Yeah, the writing is neat, but the stat blocks in a lot of 4th edition are very underwhelming.
Yeah, very. Let's just not talk about that because it's certainly not. Anywho,
it's time.
Right. Have we covered all the primary ones? Have we done everything? We've covered our manfish. We've got manfish from the beginning. So Warhammer 1 had manfish. Because, hey, menfish. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
And then we moved through the later editions, and they moved from having models to being something that was always discussed. They were quite quiet through the middle editions until we hit about 2nd edition Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay time, when they started pricking up again all over the place. There have been hints of them, like, for example, with Triton, some of the descriptions around that, around Manowar. But come Dreadfleet, come Warhammer 7 and into 8, they started being mentioned again and again and again, and often heavily. They got dropped a lot in the Dark Elves, in the Lizardmen, in the High Elves, and they also got dropped quite a lot in the role-playing side as well. And often you'll find the role-playing game goes into more depths. But they also pop up here and there inside various computer games like Total War, where there's like a little mention here or there of some nastiness coming gribbling up from the bottom, dark eyes, needle-like teeth. So, cut a long story short, before we go into the crazed section of our stream, the Fishmen are real. The Fishmen are part of the current canon of Games Workshop, as in they're part of the 8th edition, the last printed run from the studio. They are mentioned by the studio staff in multiple locations. They're mentioned in the novels. They're mentioned in White Dwarf. They're mentioned again and again. Games use them as special event cards. This isn't something that's just simply a footnote, something that will never occur, something that is dead. It's not dead. It's an ongoing part of the IP. It's just something that's never been brought to the table. If it had been brought to the battle table, we would have all the lore known to man, but it hasn't. And until it is brought, if it is ever brought, we will never have more than snippets. But those snippets are almost certain to continue. As we move into the old world, you're going to find them being mentioned almost certainly again and again in different ways. And as one concluding point, we definitely have more than one civilization of fishmen clearly described inside. We have Civilization 1, which is the classic fishmen. These are the ones that have taken over the Lizardman City, for example. It's a civilization that's down there. It's ancient. It's older than the old ones themselves, or at least older than the Cataclysm. It has artifacts that make the Dark Elves get all kind of excited because they're so powerful. They have been at war with the Dark Elves and the Lizardmen and the High Elves at various points, and they are real. This is definitely a thing. We have ourselves a second civilization that's almost certainly sitting in the under caverns, shall we say, the under sea beside Nagaroth. They might be discreet. They probably are discreet. They are associated with a bunch of monsters that are not necessarily associated with the core the core, let's say, old one associated fishmen of the oceans. They are definitely associated with all manner of horrendous creatures. And also, if we go back into the older lore, things like troglodytes and other weird stuff that lies down beneath the surface. They are at odds with the Dark Elves, but avoid them normally until they're cornered, and then they wipe them out so that there are no survivors. The Dark Elves, come modern Warhammer setting, are very concerned about them. Then we have our far more generalized let's call them the divine species, our mermaids and our sirens. They are fishmen in that they are half fish and half men, but they're sometimes half octopus, half men, half bird, half men. They come in a variety of ways. They live in the water, and they are often associated with dragging sailors and folks at sea to their doom. They definitely live out there. As to how much of a civilization they have, that is debatable. I imagine that if anyone were to write it, it would be bigger than most expect, because the oceans are freaking huge. They're the ones that are most closely associated with Triton. They're the ones that are most commonly brought up with Triton, and there are legends of them from Kislev all around the old world down to Araby, and they are, broadly speaking, the old world divine group, if you will. They are multiple different, let's say, species, breeds, races of that type. They do pop up in a lot of different ways, but they are, again, quite discreet to the horrible needle teeth, big-eyed fishmen that you get down by Lustria, for example. So we have at least 3 groups, and I'm sure that with some thought, we could probably find more.
Yeah, and that's just us sticking to the oceans. Like if we were to go further inland to lakes and stuff, it would get
the lake man.
It would get
lake man.
But we're not. We're staying away from.
We're not. Right. Okay, so this is where I now get to sit back and go conspiracy time, conspiracy time, conspiracy time.
So, all right.
Time for a drink.
So I believe that I wish I had a whiteboard. That if we put enough of all these different pieces together, we are going to end up at the conclusion, in my opinion, that the fishmen, the overall picture is that the fishmen are one of the oldest species in the Warhammer world. They predate the old ones, they predate the Cataclysm, and that they are an angry, super pissed off underwater race that wants to reclaim the vast majority of the planet. And I will explain how we get there. So, the first thing we need to note is that we need to take into mind what the Warhammer world was like before the old one showed up, which is that it was a supercontinent that was in one part of the world and everything else was ocean. Maybe iced over, but still ocean. Then the old one showed up, and with the help of the Slaanesh, they broke the continent up and they moved it around, which if you are an underwater race that occupies the vast majority of the planet, that is going to fuck up your civilization horribly. But I believe the old ones probably did not know they were there. Or if they did not know they were there, or if they did know they were there, they just didn't care very much. Or perhaps just couldn't do anything about it. Because the old ones were surprisingly bad at getting rid of races that they didn't want. So, because they couldn't even chase the greenskins underground, so I really doubt they could chase the fishmen all the way to the bottom of the ocean where it's completely black and the pressure is awful and all this other stuff. Laughing God, thank you very much for the generous super chat. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
You rock.
You do rock. So that is the first offense. The first offense is the old ones show up. They move the planet, changing the very climate is strike one. They then move all the continents, likely causing incredible earthquakes and horrible seismic events deep beneath the waves.
I'll interrupt and say, I have no idea how the Skaven have burrowed underneath the oceans. That's really the best result I can give you. The best. I mean, how have they done it? They've done it. They've done it. So they've definitely done it somehow. So they're literally under the sea, not necessarily in the sea, just to make it relatively clear here.
Yeah.
Or on top of the sea. They're more like rats in that regard. And
yeah, though, in recent, literally the last 100-ish years of the timeline, the Skaven have learned how to start making submersibles.
Because Skaven, obviously.
Because Skaven, yeah.
And you know what? Yes, that is correct. J Binks, but they could easily have done it in the same way that they did it with the Deepkin. There's lots of ways you can tell those tales, and leave it still being the vast unknown of the ocean. And this is just one example of the things that you find down there. I'd say that the reason that Games Workshop didn't do it was because Warhammer was growing increasingly less profitable over time, particularly with the way that it had been pitched, and they weren't in a position where they were happy to create an entirely new species, much like they did when they brought the Ogre Kingdoms to the table or the Lizardmen to the table, both of which were, when they were brought back in, entirely new to the Warhammer game in terms of they'd had ancient lists, but they hadn't been brought in since 4th edition. And I'd say that is a far stronger candidate for why they've not been brought in than anything else.
Yeah. And CB4N, are the Skaven in a pineapple down there? The Skaven would never be able to resist eating the pineapple and drowning horribly. It would happen every time.
Yeah, funny.
Man, yeah, I'm pretty sure someone could make a comedy skit of Skaven trying to make a boat that floats and then trying to make a submersible and just the millions of Skaven that died in the attempt. Anyway, so strike one, the climate change because of the old ones. Strike two, the continent shift, and I'm sure while the old ones minimized the damage on land, they didn't give a shit about what was happening on the depths of the ocean, and the fish people suffered horribly. I believe they suffered a full-on cataclysm because of what the old ones brought, because civilization already existed when the old ones arrived. We already had Famir, we had dragons, we had dragon ogres, we had fishmen, we had the primordial race of the lizardmen. There were already a civilization in Lustria that the old ones showed up and they took over. I don't believe this was the fishmen. I believe this was actually what would later become the Naga. That's a theory for another time. But the fishmen, I do believe, were related. But I believe they were doing their own stuff, minding their own business, and they suffer a horrible cataclysm that shatters their empire into pieces, scatters it across the globe. Millions of them die. They lose most of their architecture and a bunch of other stuff, and it's awful. And then strike three happens, which is that the old ones unleash chaos onto the world. And the gates shatter open, and the fishmen, from what we know, do not participate in this war. They're down in the bottom of the ocean. The demons don't go down there, likely because they probably didn't know anything was down there. But also, demons sometimes need to breathe, sometimes don't. Depends on the demon. But the fishmen are lurking, licking their wounds at the bottom of the ocean, and they don't move. They don't come up. They mind their own business until their first strike, which I believe because of one big thing of that, the lizardmen are very good at following predictions. They've got all these sacred plaques. They have a very good understanding of magic, and they're very good at monitoring seismic activity. If you look at the global timeline of Warhammer Fantasy, there is almost never a major seismic event that was not caused by the Slann. That is like their bread and butter is geomancy. So what happens that's very unusual? Well, hundreds, I want to say like maybe 1,000 or so years after the cataclysm, something happens the lizardmen don't understand, which is that the ocean recedes. There's no off the eastern coast. There's no warning. There's no like major earthquake they sense. They didn't do it, and there's no earthquake detected anywhere else in the world that's mentioned, even though all of the other major earthquakes that we get in Warhammer Fantasy are talked about. The ocean recedes, and the lizardmen aren't sure what to make of it. And then the Slann suddenly go, wait, okay, we need to evacuate. Something's about to happen. We need to evacuate the city. And they don't make it because the tsunami that shows up is so big that not only does it hit Chapyotl, but it hits for, I think it's literally said hundreds upon hundreds of miles inward. And it completely obliterates the population of Chapyotl, who had already evacuated. So what I think happened is I believe that the fishmen used a ritual at the bottom of their chasm because they decided to strike back against the race that hurt them the most. Because the lizardmen are who they would associate with the old ones. The lizardmen were a global species that had power across the entire planet, fought against the demons, and eventually retreated to Lustria. And the fishmen finally decided to strike back. And not only did a tsunami hit a lot of Lustria, but an entire piece of the continental shelf broke off and sunk to the bottom of a chasm where the fishmen claimed it as their trophy, their ultimate fuck you to the race that screwed them over, and they make this their new capital, a symbol of victory over an oppressor. And they dominate Chapyotl, and they also now have all these new old one tech to work with, sacred plaques that maybe they're able to interpret, maybe they're able to understand. And from here, I believe they start to spread out. A part of me that wonders about the Nagarothi civilization is that what I wonder about them is there's two real events that I think could have led to there being so many ruins. Because I bet that Underworld Sea used to be completely filled, like just fully populated with fishmen. But I think two things could have happened. The first that I really, really like is the idea that the fishmen did suffer from the demonic incursion. But it's that the demons came to Nagaroth and they came into the underwater sea where they sensed there was something down there. They sensed there was intelligent life, and the fishmen had to fight a war, and it did not go well for them. It went really, really bad. And what fishmen did survive in the underworld sea, just like with the forest spirits of Athel Loren, those that managed to survive only did so because they became something so awful, so bloodthirsty and dark and cruel in order to be able to beat the demons back. That's what left of them is just that. It's no longer really civilized. It's more of it's very good at hiding. And if something finally corners it, it absolutely tears it apart and devours it. But it doesn't seem to expand because all it cares about is surviving at this point, which is what Adenhu was terrified was going to happen to Athel Loren, was that it would turn into this kind of like horrible thing, which is why he bound the what would become the Wood Elves to it, so they would temper Athel Loren to give it balance. And then but I believe that since then, the Fishmen have just been slowly expanding. This is why they're starting to show up in Ulthuan. This is why they're starting to show up in the Sea of Chaos, or the Sea of Claws. I would even go so far as to say I would not be shocked if Triton and the Mer people do have their own underwater civilization, but they are opposed to the Fishmen. Especially if it turns out that Triton and all of his lot are divine, they are a god-related species. To the Fishmen, that would basically just make them like the old ones. They would be this new invasive species into their territory as they're trying to claim their way towards the old world, which is probably why we don't see the Fishmen as much in the old world. We tend to see them more around the Lizardmen, Dark Elves, High Elves, and out on the high seas. You don't really see them on the coast of the old world, but I think that's because there's an invasive species that's already there that the Fishmen are pushing against, but they haven't yet had the chance to defeat in any meaningful way. So that leads us to having a species that has super powerful artifacts that they moved into Chapyotl, because the Krakenhelm should not have been in Chapyotl at the start. That is something the Fishmen brought to Chapyotl, which to me suggests that is their new capital. That is...
I have a counter theory.
Yeah, okay, we'll get to that. But like they brought things to it, I think. They relocated powerful things to it. Maybe it's a prison, you can almost think. A place where they keep things they don't want anyone else getting, or maybe that they don't want to use. But they've been dominating sea creatures. They've been getting, they've been adding augments onto sea creatures with like the weird shell things on some of their Kraken beasts. And I do not think they're a chaos species. I don't think they're an order species or if anything, I would classify them as a neutral, kind of like your ogres, your greenskins, or your tomb kings, where they're minding their own goddamn business. But I do believe that there are moments, kind of like the tide itself, where they become more and less aggressive. But I also believe that they're incredibly sensitive to light, which is why I think one of the big things they hate about the old ones is that the old ones literally moved the planet closer to the sun. They made the world brighter and warmer. And for the Fishmen, that's probably miserable, because the bottom of the ocean is dark. It's dark as fuck, and it's cold. Those are complete opposite of the surface. Whereas way back in the day, the surface would have been a little better for them. It would have been colder and darker because the sun would have been further away. I do believe they have gods. I think they have a full-on religion. There are notes in the 4th edition Lustria expansion book about a couple of gods that are said to be sleeping in the depths that have ancient worshippers, and the Lizardmen really aren't sure what to make of it. So the Lizardmen just kind of protect it from everyone else, and make sure nobody messes with it, just to be safe. And so with all of that, we have a full civilization that crumbled and was fully crippled, but has since been building itself back and is slowly but surely getting more aggressive. And I think that with maybe the exception of some races like the Famir or the Naga or the dragons, that they probably hate every single other species that's on the surface because it reminds them of the oppressors who took everything away from them. And thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
I don't disagree with all of that. I don't dislike all of that. In fact, there's large chunks of it I like. I think that there is perhaps a little bit too much overarching understanding, because it's so long ago now that I think the chances of them truly understanding who they are and why they are is very low. However, the lore quite clearly associates some of the Fishmen directly with the old ones. So at least one faction, and it does seem most likely it's the faction that's already by the Lizardmen, were elevated by the old ones and taken from what they were originally into something new. However, I really like that our shattered civilization that is encountered again and again across the north of the New World. Is probably the last remnants of the Fishmen or what they once were, and that civilization has survived down in the depths of the underseas down there to this day. I think that the brooding hatreds that lie there are potentially very real. And if you perhaps add something like the Circlet of Iron as coming from them, some of the great artifacts that have been found in what is now the realm of chaos to the north, possibly coming from them as well. We have an ancient, powerful, capable species that predates the lizardmen. I definitely think there is something there that predates the old ones because it's brought up again and again. The entire area around the Dark Elves constantly mentions ruins from a species before the old ones. And we have a civilization dropped there clearly in the text. So equating those two is not a bad idea. Unfortunately for the whole plan that has been suggested there, the best answer to many of the fishmen that are down by Lustria is that they were elevated, quite unlike the ones to the north, which kind of sucks because I really quite like that idea.
I will choose to disregard it.
Yeah, indeed, let's disregard those parts. I think in terms of the overall story, we definitely have a story here, which is that there was a civilization that was in existence that was scaly and kind of fishy and definitely amphibious. I said aquatic earlier. I meant to say amphibious earlier. That is amphibious. And to just go back to what Roderick asked me to do, it's beginning to look a lot like Fishmen. He did ask me to sing it because it is. So there was an ancient civilization. They were magical, they were powerful, they existed in a realm where the dragons and the dragon ogres et al. Already existed, and they were above ground, above the surface, and this was the species that was probably below. There might have been multiple different kingdoms, varieties, or whatever. The lizardmen come. They are not part of the lizardmen's plan, except the lizardmen perhaps take some of them, elevate them, give them some great job, as was often the case. Although to me, it doesn't look like that occurred. What seems much more likely is that the cataclysm occurred, and in their desperation, they did something to some of the fishmen. And they gave them a different purpose in the same way that they did with the gnomes, for example, or the ogres, or the halflings, all of which were elevated above their original position. So that probably occurred because there is definitely connections to old ones made. So we have that, and then we have the horrendous war. We have the arrival of the ocean filling with chaos. We'll have had demons spilling through. We'll have had mutant fish of a variety of different kinds, new species coming out of nowhere, everything throttling the life out of the world they once knew. The world has gone to fuck. Now, it's easy to say they didn't take part in the Great War and the Cataclysm. I think they did. It's just nobody else noticed because it was underwater. It would have been a horror show. It would have been truly awful. Their civilization is beat down just like everybody else's. They may even have lost with only a few pockets of their civilizations left. And then when magic is sucked from the world by that great vortex, go see our previous streams. If you don't know what that is, Winds of Magic is a good one. So go check that one out. The ocean's empty. What little pockets of civilizations have survived, some of them trapped away inside the caverns underneath Nagaroth, others at the bottom of the ocean in various places. And they just build up new civilizations. It's not so much that they are carrying the burgeoning hatreds of previous generations. It's just more, they're alive now. Let's carry on. New civilizations are created in the same way that Nehekara has absolutely nothing to do with the Empire or Grand Cathay. There's lots of different groups under the water, all doing their own thing. And one of those groups has a fell purpose that's certainly really fucked up with the lizardman stuff down in Lustria. As to how to develop that further, I definitely completely agree that there is an aggressive group that are moving at a pace. They are infiltrating the High Elves, they're infiltrating probably the Dark Elves, and into the territories that they know, and definitely the Lizardmen as well. Are they different groups? That's all down to individuals who want to write them in their own way. But I will conclude that they definitely exist. Definitely. There's not are they? They definitely do. There are definitely some of them associated with old ones. Definitely some of them are pitched against the lizardmen hard. Definitely, some of them are by the Dark Elves, and definitely a lot of them are over by the Old World. And if we go around to the other side of the world, there's probably other types. Because one thing the Warhammer world has that we don't have is Heish. And Heish brings sentience. So that means, as it's been flooding its way through the oceans for the last 8, and Heish is of all the winds, the most diffuse. It goes through everything. It's throughout the ocean. It's throughout the crust of the planet. It is everywhere, and it brings sentience. Creatures come out from the cracks, and where beforehand they might have done nothing, it speeds up evolution at a ridiculous rate, and they bring not just evolution, but sentience. They start to think. So no matter where you go in the Warhammer world, things start coming up with thinking brains, quite unlike the real world in this regard. And that being the case, our oceans are full with stuff that think and do. So that means it's not just it makes sense for them to exist because the setting says so, Heish, but it makes sense because it's been written about again and again and again and again. So we're going to have all manner of shit down there, loads of civilizations, and I think everything Sotek says is probably the case, but not for all of them by any stretch. I think that'll be a faction, another faction, all of which have got their own individual hopes, dreams, and goals. And you know what makes it super fascinating?
You know what you just said that actually kind of pinged in my head is that if Games Workshop does what they should do, explore the entire world. If someone uses like Japanese mythologies for Nippon would probably have one of the most fascinating and in-depth interactions with the Fishmen race. Because they're an island, it's a tall, like Japan's got a lot of, like it's a decent sized series of islands, but they're so deeply surrounded and they have so many mythologies about what lurks in the oceans.
Yeah, I think the same would be the case for, say, places like Albion, where you could bring things like the Kelpies and similar ideas for up there. Anywhere that's got mythology that's associated with the sea, which is pretty much every single island nation ever, is going to have deep ties to some form of fishman or some form of at least sea-based intelligence. So I think as we're moving towards our second hour, I think it's fair to say that we have very much made it clear that they're freaking real.
Yep. So Christopher, I don't know necessarily about breeding, but what if they're taking people down there to alter them and then they return them to the surface for some nefarious purpose? That is absolutely an idea that could be explored.
Yeah, the whole concept of the water spirit that takes you and drags you underwater is core to a great deal many myths, and not using that would be a mistake. And they're often associated with changeling myths as well. The idea that something is taken and replaced with something else. So doing that really works. Plus, in the Warhammer world already, we have our naiads and nereids and all the rest, and they literally do breed with species, generally the elves. But they do breed with them. They do mate with them, and they might not have kids. They might. In my version, they most certainly do. And that has caused issues. That's directly, in fact, I can literally quote here one. My heart was lanced through when I received the order. Now, this is an elf who's received the order to return to Ulthuan. And the reason is because he can't cope with being parted from his wife, who is a nereid, who is a spirit of the water. And she is tied to that water and can't leave. And that's his wife. And he hikes it back to Ulthuan. So the elves do this, and the chances of them breeding with, say, humans or other sea communities isn't just high. I think it's beyond high. We've got mermaids, we've got various other crossbreeds. The beastmen do it. There's going to be chaos infected ones. The idea that there isn't the equivalent of beastmen of the ocean is frankly farcical for Warhammer. Chaos is everywhere. So there's going to be all manner of things. There's going to be changeling kids in the same way that there's changeling beastmen kids. There's going to be beastmen of the water who are effectively your mermaids, maybe the more bestial ones. The answer, I think, to that is probably yes, but it does get pretty unpalatable if you start thinking about it too deeply.
Yeah, but yeah, you could. I would be if Games Workshop ever did go full tilt with the Fishmen. I don't think they could physically resist using the Shadows over Innsmouth to tell a story somewhere of like a city that's being taken over by them.
Is there some more issues kicking over there on YouTube? Apologies for issues on YouTube. Nothing we can do about that one.
Yep, go to Switch. Song of Power, Fishmen and Warpstone. How do you imagine that works? That would be a really interesting thing to explore. Like, how resistant would they be to it? It's like, oh, well, you could argue the ocean's full of so much magic, and the lore kind of establishes that like the there's something deep beneath the earth that has always had where the magic's been, based on how the geometric web works, which if the fishmen have lived in those deep chasms, maybe they were closer to it than anybody else. So maybe they're particularly resistant against magic, like physically affecting them, in which case Warpstone, they would be able to use it relatively safely. But alternatively, it could be that it's just as dangerous to them as everyone else. So if they're Warpstone meteors that land in the ocean and sink to the bottom, the fishmen have probably had to deal with it. How that would affect them, though,
yes to all of that. And I'll also add, though, that there is definitely several instances in the lore where artifacts associated with the fishmen, like, for example, what was the name of that one? It's the Abyss one again. I always keep forgetting the name of it. I'll maybe have a note. Doesn't really matter. It's the Howling Abyss, I recall. The Howling Abyss in the Monstrum Arcanum. That one there is associated with the good old Fishmen. And that is basically a portal through to not the realms of chaos, but one of the other fragmented other realms of reality around. It's an old portal, and it's mentioned in a couple of places. And this portal is exuding magic, so it's definitely a thing. That's over by Tilia, so there's definitely stuff out there. What was this from Hammond? Q in Discovery Channel Fishman song. I love the chasms, love the deep blue seas, I love big monsters, love when great whale. Is there a tune to this? Because I feel like I'm missing.
Yes, there is, but Hammond keeps referencing songs that nobody knows because it's Hammond.
Dude, I can't sing it if I don't know the tune. I would be happy, but I don't watch the Discovery Channel. I feel sad because I can't.
The Discovery Channel used to be good, but it's just not anymore. I'm sorry.
Hey, morning.
I'm sorry.
To make Andy laugh, remember Innsmouth was inspired by Lovecraft finding out that his grandmother was Welsh, and that does make me laugh. oh, that made me laugh a lot. In fact, that tickles me.
That ridiculous racist bastard. Anyway,
right. So, are we going to move on to questions?
Yeah, we have a ton.
Questions time now because we've got quite a lot of questions to work through this week, and we'd like to get through as many of them as possible.
Yeah. So, okay. Let's get going. Half Crown. Could one of the Lords of Musion secretly be a fishman under the signature black helmet? And if so, would they invest resources in a municipal water system of Musion City? You joke, but Musion is right on the ocean. And it is a sinister city where there's a lot of horrible shit happening. And there are a lot of different factions vying for power there. The idea that there could be a fishman race that could be trying to send agents into Musion, I would not put past possibilities. Now, do I think that's who the Black Knight is? Obviously not.
No.
But
no.
we got to do a stream on Malabad.
If you want to do it for your own thing, sure. But yeah, that's not the story I'd be trying to tell there. There's better ways of tying in our equivalent to fishmen, our aquatic rate species, than trying to override somebody else's story, which is riffing on different myths. I would most certainly not do that there. But the idea of having some sort of Selkie-like creature or a witch of the waters, which I think would work very well for Musalon, a dark witch of the waters that was getting appealed to out in the ocean and then possibly getting summoned to bring in some great tidal wave, that works really quite well, and that could tie into these myths relatively easily.
Yeah, and I will say that is the one thing I refuse to budge on no matter who I talk to, is that the fishmen are capable of summoning tidal waves like they did to Chip Yodel, because it's the only thing, it's the best way that makes sense. Also why the Lisbon couldn't predict it, and it's also a fucking terrifying power because tsunamis are just, they're one of the scariest fucking things in existence.
Yeah, totally.
Next. Oh, this question is actually really good. Like, it's funny, but it's also a genuinely interesting question. Von Raptor asks, are the fishmen or menfish that Marius Leekdorf goes on about the actual fishmen, or are they just imagined fishmen that are based on real fishmen, or did he encounter something similar? What is going on with him?
What's going on with Marius Leekdorf? Wow. Okay, so Marius Leekdorf is a genius. Let's start off with that. He's exceedingly intelligent. He's an artist. He's a poet. He's also mad as a brush. He is one of the finest swordsmen in the Empire, while simultaneously appointing his own horse to a host of important political positions. He perceives things that aren't there. Would he be uttering stuff that is potentially true? Yes. If you want to make a character who's potentially a seer, Marius Leitdorf is that character, while simultaneously spouting absolute nonsense. So I think, yeah, sure, if you want it to be something that is real, you absolutely can make it so. Then you can literally have Marius say anything, and that could be the case, though. He is a unique character.
My favorite quote of his is how angry he gets when he talks about no one appreciating him for stopping the Great Unicorn Invasion of like 25. It was like 2501 or something like that. He's like, no one else stopped the unicorns. It was I. It's like, oh, Marius. And I don't, he could be completely right and nobody would know and nobody would believe him.
True fact.
He's also incredibly infamous for being one of the biggest dicks in the world. He has started numerous wars because of how he insults people. He's really good at insulting people.
Yeah.
And his death was actually really sad.
It was.
He went out like a boss against Vorbad Ironjaw. But anyway, Porpoise asks, are there any cults of fishmen throughout the Empire of Man? I do recall the short story of Gotrek and Felix facing a sea cult, but wondering if the fishmen might have infiltrated coastal cities and areas like Skaven have.
I think the answer is certainly yes. There are definitely throughout the old world a host of communities that are aware of sirens, for example, and sirens are just one manifestation of a greater equivalent of a fishman society that lives in and around the old world in various pockets. Are some of those going to be weird and sinister and cultish? Definitely. This is Warhammer. There's always weird and sinister and cultish elements to almost everything. So I would be absolutely appalled if that weren't the case, because it would be an absolute waste of very good material.
Yeah. Also, have you ever met like a human? If any of us encounter anything slightly weird, we're like, oh, we're just going to worship that now.
It's either worship it or bang it. That's pretty much what humans do.
so both have probably happened.
Yeah, absolutely.
Considering there's literally a in 4th edition, there's a hilarious note in the Sea of Claws book about there is a icon of Zunki, who is the old one god that is associated with water, that is worshipped in a Norscan tribe as a sea god, because they don't really know what it is, but they're like, oh, we figured out it's associated with water, and so they're worshiping an old one, which is really funny. Also, I just wanted to bring this up because I did find the right page. On page 75 of 8th edition Big Red Book, there was the never got used, the core rule sea creature, which says, in the deep seas of the Warhammer world lurk all manner of foul and wondrous denizens, from the killer kraken to the sinuous sea serpents and black-scaled leviathans. Such creatures can move through water as easily as man walks the land, but are somewhat ponderous when out of their element. And it was literally saying that you get half movement if you are moving on ground instead of water terrain.
As I'd say, it was set up for including them later. Even if they had no deep plans for doing so, they set it all up so they could do so. Abyss Walker adds, a Fishman Corn Berserker or other god equivalent? Nice! And I agree. And I think that there will be fallen fishmen, just like there's fallen anything else. And whenever the fishmen, if they ever did get expanded, they wouldn't be called fishmen, because that's a terrible name for any species. Oh, lizardmen. Let's just move on.
Beastmen.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, surely they wouldn't do it a third time.
Gores. They're called gores. Thank goodness.
Von Raptor, are fishmen edible? And if so, do they count as surf and turf? Are they edible? Probably.
Yes.
Somebody would try.
Definitely. Someone's going to try eat them. I had back in 2nd edition, I had a character who used to basically discuss how to cook each and every different denizen of the Warhammer world. And whenever I used them for writing, it would just be basically a recipe. And that was
I will say, one of the most criminal things that 4th edition doesn't have is the two big characters in 2nd edition of I think it's an ogre. Is it a person and an ogre that like says how to eat everything? That you're talking about.
I'm not sure which one you're.
That's
a Bretonian chef.
It was a Bretonian chef. But there was also the Clan Eshin assassin who said how to kill anything with poison. That character was so good because like it was like, oh, if you're playing a poisoner character, he can give you lore knowledge. on how to do it.
Slightly annoyingly, that was supposed to be being picked up in the what is now the Imperial Zoo book, where it wasn't going to be the Imperial Zoo book at that point, where one of the characters was going to be effectively describing how you could kill each one of the monsters and also use each one of the monsters to create new poisons to kill other monsters. That was going to be the whole point of that character. Sadly, that character disappeared. Hammond!
Oh, God.
Do all gods have power over death? Why did Stromfels take in dollar store?
Solostra Deer Fund.
From what would happen to dead fishmen? We don't know is the answer. The best answer we have is that everything in the ocean gets swept up into the maelstrom down at the arsehole of the world. Go check out the Maw stream for more on that. But I think
okay. You're not talking about Solostra. You're talking about the Brine Maiden.
The Brine Maiden.
She is a siren, a very, very powerful siren who lives off the Vampire Coast.
And again, we don't know. Loosely speaking, all gods don't have power over death in terms of how the pantheons are organized, but that doesn't mean that the fishmen civilizations don't have their own traditions and their own way of dealing with these things. And if you were writing them, you would create new ones. It wouldn't be the same ones being repeated again. More, for example, is quite different to say Morai Heg, who's quite different to say Erith Kail, and how each one of those manifests with different underworld connections.
Yeah, or Jeff. Or Jeff.
Jeff. Yeah.
I know, it just sounds silly when you say it out loud. Who's the Nehakaran death god? Oh yeah, it's Jeff. It's
good old Jeff.
But yeah, like I would be shocked if the fishmen didn't have their own death god. Which
if you
were tying everything together, the creation of the Maelstrom could actually have a lot of really interesting interaction there.
Yeah, that'd be a really good one to pull in. Good old Jeff. But yeah, you would definitely, their civilization would change because of what happened with the creation of them all.
So next question would be the only other thing I want to say about Stromfels is that I think because of what Total War did with them, Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, because Games Workshop approved it, are likely following suit, which seems to be Stromfels is kind of being given power over those who die at sea. His sphere seems to be kind of
weird.
Swallowing that up a bit because he's
that's weird.
I know, but like he's kind of the patron of the Vampire Coast is the way they kind of twisted it, and with this the Brine Maiden kind of getting his powers as well. With Solostra they established the idea that he can resurrect people that die at sea into ghosts.
Sean asks, how would you bring the Fishman to Total War? Well, first I'd speak to the programmers and I'd speak to the animators.
That is not what they're asking, but yes.
Oh, really? Is it
not? This is actually the next question on the Discord as well from Castrated. So there are two ways you could do it. The way I would prefer is for them to be a standalone race, for them to just be a full awesome race or a mini race that comes out just like the Chaos Dwarfs or whatever, and they get like all sorts of cool things. They get their own monsters, they get their own units. If they weren't allowed to do that and they just had to squeeze them into somebody else, I would be sad. But I would probably divide them up into just relevant places. So like, if it's a big sea monster, like merworm, like if you're like, you got merworms and stuff. Well, if they do, which they probably will, the Sea Patrol faction for the High Elves, so I'm going to put some over there. Nagaroth has a whole thing with pulling creatures up from the depths. So I'm going to put some over there with the Dark Elves. Maybe I'll give a big scaly monster to the Lizardmen from the seas. And like, if they ever do like Marienburg, maybe I'll give them some kind of like divine unit. I'll put naiads with the Bretonians. I'll put sea nymphs with like Araby if they ever were a thing. You would just kind of divide them up into semi-relevant places. The Vampire Coast could get a couple more big monsters because they're very nautical. I would prefer them to be their own thing, but if you had to chop them up, you could.
I'll tell you after I've played the game more.
Fair enough.
That's my answer. I need to go play the game more. Doing it very soon. New PC just sitting down there.
I'm so excited.
Good
so excited.
Me too.
Mr. Massacre, is there any major Warhammer events besides the Seeking of Chup-Yodel associated with the Fishmen? As far as like, major events, I would probably say no.
No, not that I can think of. I mean, there's lots of hints and there's lots of ruins, but there's no defined there's nothing defined beyond this people met the Fishmen and were wiped out. Somebody got away and told us about it. We all laughed at them. But beyond that, no, not really.
Yeah. Because they're mostly kind of portrayed as they tend to be very heavily portrayed as almost like ambush predators or taking advantage of very specific situations, almost like scavengers. So they don't tend to be a big event type group.
Yeah, I think relatively soon. I say relatively because I want to get to grips with it a little bit first. But I'm definitely going to be streaming it soonish. We've got another room that I need to get this computer into first, and I've got a variety of setup things to do, but we'll
let you know.
Yeah, we'll let you know exactly. Song of Power. Do you think go.
Do you think there's a secret pocket ocean realm as the Fishmen had to escape the end times and made it to AOS somehow? But sure, why not? Who the fuck knows? I don't know.
It's the Warhammer world. If the Light College of Magic can live in its own pocket realm within Altdorf, trust me, there's going to be in the greater world a bajillion other examples of that in a bajillion other ways. So the answer to that is almost certainly yes.
Yeah, well, especially if you think about like how our world has really active myths about how there's like an underworld sea that like connects all of the world seas and all this other shit. Like, there's no way they wouldn't run with that in Warhammer. So probably.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it'll be a thing.
E13. Do the Fishmen get along with anyone? Not that we've really seen. They don't seem to have many friends.
No, I think it's fair to say that the answer is probably no. But I will add, though, that is looking at them as a universal constant. I would say that given that there are almost certainly many different civilizations and pocket communities and a variety of other things, there'll be examples where they do. But do be aware, this is Warhammer, and I will stress the first syllable of that. War, and you tend to find that most of the civilizations in Warhammer are given very good reason to be wanting to kill, hate, or otherwise tear apart their neighbors. So no matter what,
I gotta be able to hit my figurines together. Otherwise,
yeah, totally. You take that. No, you take that. No, you, dude. Seriously, yeah. So the answer will probably be no. I think if you want a good model for them, think of them like the Lizardmen.
Gio, we do look at the YouTube comments, but we're answering questions from the Discord that were pre-submitted beforehand. But I do read them. I do see them over there.
Just so you know, and if you happen to be watching this later, we have a thread or a stream put aside in Sotek's Discord every single week for questions to be pre-submitted. So if they're submitted during the show, we're not going to look at them. Submitted after the show, we won't look at them. But we do take comments over there. So if you do want to ask us any questions beforehand, pop into Sotek's server, go ask your questions there, and we will probably bring them up during the show. Other than that, your best bets to get through are super chat like mad.
Yeah, super chats.
Oh yeah,
we will interrupt ourselves.
Yeah, every single time, because we're very thankful and you rock.
Yep, we need to eat. Woodfire, thank you for the question. Do you think the old ones planned to exterminate the Fishmen? And if so, what would they have used to do so? Same thing they would have used for everything else. Their war machines and Saurian legions. And I personally believe I see Andy's counterpoints. I don't believe that they're a planned race from the old ones, or that the old ones looked at them and went, mistake, and tried to wipe them out, which is why they retreated down there. But could be that the old ones sent them down there on purpose.
Either will do. There's lots of potential answers for that, and I think that getting those answers half the fun.
I will admit I am very biased about Old One and Chaos races. I think I really want there to be a main playable race that is pre-Old One, pre-Chaos, that doesn't have anything to do with them. And I think we're criminally lacking those, so that's why.
I think that the if I were to do it, I would probably use the cavern dwelling ones, because that makes an almost perfect group, because we have a lot of existing lore in that area that is fucking scary. Malekith got most of his power from them. And that the ruins that are there are the source of his power. Look at how Loki has become, potentially from a similar route. There's lots of cool shit that you could draw on from that. So yeah, I'd be well up for using that as a method of giving us an army that is not just Old One elevated or Chaos.
Let's see. Mr. Massacre, did Chaos's arrival corrupt the Fishmen like the other races on the Warhammer world? Almost assuredly.
Yeah.
There is no escape from chaos. That's
there's
universal constant.
There is only one species in the Warhammer world which is truly incorruptible, and that's the Slann. But even they, under certain circumstances, are in a desperate position. But if you want the official word on it, the Slann are incorruptible. But that's it. Doesn't mean that they don't make mistakes. Doesn't mean they don't get everything right. But yeah, incorruptible.
Yeah, and the Slann go through a lot of trouble to keep it that way. Like, the Slann are not confident in that themselves.
Yeah, totally.
Mr. Snowbomber, where is Morger on the Fishman scale? 1 being least like a Fishman and 10 just being a Fishman with horns. Probably a 1, maybe a 2. Like Morger's barely even a Beastman, to be honest. But that's for a whole nother thing.
I'm sure we'll do Morger at some point.
Yeah, we have to. I love him so much. All right, Servant of Sin. Do any of them live in a pineapple under the sea? Sure, why not? Don't let your dreams be memes be dreams. Is Dr. Zoidberg the ruler? I would love if they ever, honestly, the way Games Workshop likes to name characters.
Or is Lokier just Dr. Zoidberg?
Anytime he has to run away, just whoop, 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 whoop.
It's actually worth saying that several of the merfolk equivalents are given claws instead of hands. So, and as ridiculous as it may sound, there's at least one of the mermaid species that only have claws for hands. And if you go over and look at the old ones that were popped up in what those land ones called, the ones in the Bretonian book that I keep forgetting,
the Lakemen.
Yeah, the Lakemen. They also have claws for hands as well. So the idea of the fish folk having claws for hands is actually canon in multiple places. So it's definitely in there somewhere. Kremlo disagrees with you.
I don't give a damn about Kremlo. Oh my! I finally read that story not that long ago, and it was like, okay, Warhammer was in a different place.
Yeah, it moves around a little bit. Does good old Warhammer?
Yeah. Let's see. If Gelt was captured by the Fishmen, what might happen to him? I mean, he would just probably never be seen again, or worse, be turned into some kind of puppet. Who is calling me?
You say worse? That sounds better.
I was Jacob.
We're getting calls during the show. That's one way to get your question asked.
Yeah. So let's see. How do you think the Fishmen view chaos? They didn't seem to like the old ones. I think they probably hate chaos even more.
Definitely. I mean, chaos is the ultimate enemy for pretty much everyone, no matter who they are. Nobody likes chaos except for chaos themselves. So yeah, bad guys.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think they would be friendly with chaos at all, especially because I don't need any more chaos species. We have so many, and like the Naga of Koresh are probably going to end up being a chaos species if they use the lore they already have. So I want like another greenskin species where they're just kind of there and they're on nobody's side and they're just spooky. We need more of those in the world.
I'm going to bring this one up because it amuses me. What inspiration are you taking for the real world for the Fishmen culture? I'm bringing this one up because I think that's it speaks to what Games Workshop always does, which is lifting real world stuff and dropping it in. But it also speaks to how would you build them if you were going to do it anyway. And there are a variety of real world myths ranging from our Atlantis myths. And look, we all know that Ulthuan is basically the Atlantis myth. But there are a variety of different cultures that could be drawn upon, but most of them are fictional. So I think the best answer to that one would be almost certainly something fictional, which is relatively problematic because most of the fictional cultures are under copyright. So it would be a classic Games Workshop reimagining.
Yeah, I would look at real world mythologies is usually your safest bet. Like look at Polynesian mythology or Japanese mythology, because a lot of cultures that were surrounded by the ocean and had to deal with the ocean a lot and see what they came up with.
Definitely.
But, be respectful about it and try not to use the actual people. You try and stick to the actual myths.
Yeah, turning real people into animals is never a good look.
Let's see. Sotek's character in the Monstrous Arcade. Oh, okay. So I don't think Andy's ever seen that. So like 3 or 4 years ago for a Halloween special, I did like an episode a day type thing, but I was playing a character who was like instructing some person he found about Fishmen, but it's revealed at the very not about Fishmen, but about various monsters across the Warhammer world. And we covered all sorts of different fun things. But the last episode, it's revealed that he's a Fishman cultist. and he actually like works with the Fishmen, and they give him immortality and knowledge and a bunch of other nonsense.
Totes. I'd just like to make one other comment because I was spotting me other comments come up. We do occasionally take the comments up from that are sitting inside the comment chat. Don't think that if you make comments we don't read and look. We're reading them all the time. So everything that you do comment, we are reading, and we will very occasionally bring them up in the live chats too. Just so you know.
Yep. Oh, like a good one, Core Artificer of that. I think you're kind of referencing the Sea People from the collapse of the Bronze Age. That could be an interesting place to look because there's not a lot of known about the Sea People. They're kind of very mysterious, and we're very scary apparently.
And you'd probably draw on ancient myths of like the islands of Thule and the old civilizations that lie off in the oceans. It'd be all manner of cool shit you could draw on if you started doing all of your research.
Let's see, Lopi. What gods do the Fishmen believe in? We don't know. We don't know that much about them. It's very scant. And it's almost always from the position of people being attacked by them, not what they're actually like.
True fact. But knowing Games Workshop, it's almost certain that they would say, it's Manan and Stromfells, because they've got some gods already, so they'll just repurpose them and reuse them. I think that's almost a disservice to what would be a grand and complicated set of civilizations. But I would definitely use them. They would be a part of it somewhere in the fabric there. Kabanda!
What did I just say about Kremlo? He's trash. Kremlo is trash. I said it here. F tier. He's F tier. He's a weird character. He's got a stupid name. And the Slann were freaking nightmare fuel back then. They were fat frogs with very skinny legs that were athletic, and I hated them. Anyway, he's a Slann that joined the Norskins before the Slann were what they are today. He's a heretic and should be burned at the stake. Moving on.
Definitely a thing.
In the final Malice Darkblade model, there was a Malice Darkblade novel. There was a giant sea creature / demon that attacked their black arcs. What the heck was it? I don't remember off the top of my head, but usually if it's something terrorizing people at sea, Games Workshop's favorite ultimate monster for the ocean is the Black Leviathan.
The good old big teeth Black Leviathan again, first popped up in Manowar. And they do like their big tentacly, krakeny type creatures as well, because it just reeks of the sea. You'll find that the Warhammer World's oceans are freaking enormous, and they will hold entities and creatures of ridiculous size, and many of them will only ever be seen once because the seas are so huge. So they can literally just say, that gigantic creature that we want this week, bring it up and never use it again, and it's still not weird.
Let's see, from Flying Taco, do you think fishmen would biologically be fish, mammals, crustaceans, ghouls, or their own classification?
Yeah,
I think they'd probably be their own classification. I don't think they would be mammals. I could say that with confidence because they would probably die horribly at the bottom of the sea. But they'd probably be a mix of all sorts of different weird things.
That was Qui-Gon Jinn.
Yeah, that was Qui-Gon. Yeah.
Hey, Mr. Pig! They're not letting it go, so
I don't. Kremlo is just I put him in that part of my mind. What is the opposite of a tower of memories? where do you put things that you never?
What you're saying is Kremlo's your guilt.
Yes, yeah, you could say that. Kremlo. He sounds like a Muppet character. All right. Ryan Litch, do you think the Fishmen would be an order race, neutral, or chaos? I would say neutral / destruction.
Yeah, you could easily see factions forming, and some of them might be chaos, and some of them might be. But I've never really been that keen on trying to force the species of the Warhammer world into this very fake, artificial good guy, bad guy, neutral guy model, because it just doesn't work. Most of them are self-interested fuckers, and they're not good guys and they're not bad guys. Trying to say that the High Elves is good guys to me is just mental sometimes. And the same for the Empire. They're self-interested.
Well, it's not good guys. It's just civilization building.
You've basically got everybody that's anti-chaos. And chaos.
Yeah. That
and then you've got people that just fight for the sake of fighting.
Yeah, the order and chaos system is one of those things where if you try and look at it too closely, it doesn't work actually, which is funny. But like the old one they used for fantasy, the AOS one makes a lot more sense, but the fantasy one is goofy.
It is.
Because they're like, oh, they only count if they build civilization, and then destruction is anti-civilization. But then they put the Dark Elves in the destruction category, which is like, Like I get that they're kind of parasites on other civilizations because they're slavers, but like they do build a civilization. This is the whole thing. No, get out. How dare you get out.
Thank you very much for the suggestion. I might take that on board.
I will. Yeah, no. Have orcs interacted with them? I don't recall there being a specific mention.
I can't think of one, but they obviously have.
Yeah, and there are orc like greenskin fleets are a big thing. Like there are greenskin pirates in fantasy, and they're just as hilarious as you think they would be. And it's undoubtable to me that fishmen have attacked a greenskin pirate fleet.
You find that when an orc Wa hits a coast and there's nowhere to go, they don't turn back. They start building and they go across and they keep on going until they hit the other side. So that definitely would have occurred. If anything, though, the fishmen have one major advantage and they can just go, yeah, whatevs, and go down.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe some of Wa Grom got lost because fishmen attacked some of the isolated ships because he lost a lot of his fleet. So
he did.
All right. What do we think the relationship would be? Okay, what do we think the relationship between the fishmen, the other older races would be, such as elves, lizardmen, snakemen of Koresh, and even the dragon emperor? I imagine they probably wouldn't be friendly with anybody. Maybe rivals, like with the dragons, or who knows? Maybe they had some kind of alliance with the dragons of old. But like there were sea dragons, so who knows? Like the fishermen could have sea dragons with them.
Actually, I'm going to bring something up here because they have never met because orcs are from 40k. Ever.
You know, I like to be nice to people about that. I get it. It happens.
Just so you don't know, but I bring it up because it is worth knowing. Orcs with a C are Warhammer. Orcs with a K are 40k. And it is worth bringing up just so, you know, there is a difference between them.
There is only one setting in all of fiction where it's with a K. And it's 40k. Every other setting.
Hammond also mentioned it. Looks like I'm not alone. Look, Hammond also brought it up.
All right.
Anyway.
But yeah, no, I don't think the fisherman would. Now, I do think the Naga of Koresh could actually maybe have something interesting going on there. If the Naga are also a primordial species. The 4th edition Lustria book seems to almost imply that the Naga were maybe the original lizardmen. And then the Naga might have been what descended or what the old ones turned them into, and the Naga escaped somewhere and then reemerged after the cataclysm. Who can say? But who knows? There might be a relationship there. But the Naga also seem like they're kind of what the Chaos Dwarves are to machinery and industry. The Naga seem to be to like blood magic and biological warfare, so they might be really nasty, but we'll have to wait and see.
So I have a little bit. We do know their relationship with some of them already because it's established, and that's the elves, and the elves know pretty much fuck all. Indeed, they were quite convinced that there wasn't anything, and it came as a bit of a shock. So they don't really have a relationship, and I think that that's probably going to be the case for almost all land-dwelling species until the sea-dwelling species decide that they want to come up, and then they become a concern, and then you start establishing relationships. Beyond that, is there the potential for communities, individual communities here and there spotted around the Warhammer world, working with, trading with, dealing with each other? Sure. But you'd need to have a pretty decent story for why that's the case, and also why it isn't well known by others. So it's not something that I would see being a very likely outcome.
Do they have any special characters? If not, is there any material you think could allude to one? We don't ever get any specifics really about them. But if you ever wanted to come up with one, I would just look in mythology for like really famous gods or creatures or like specific creatures and stuff that live at sea. Because GW usually like kind of, if they can find an easy thing like that, it's not usually that unusual for them to use it.
So I mean, you're really looking at Triton, which is a little bit like saying you're looking at Ariel or Orion, a godlike entity. You're looking at potentially some of the old spirits, which are named here or there, mostly on the role-playing side. So you might get a name that sounds vaguely elven for one of the spirits. But that would be an equivalent of, say, Durthu rather than a fishman. That'd be the equivalent of a tree man, a water spirit, something that might be the equivalent of a tidal entity, or an underground hot stream of water. Got to remember, the space down there is a 3D space, so the spirits that are down there are going to be swirls that may move in a particular way, a bit like a river that you get up all above ground, and they'll be also associated with certain winds of magic. So yeah, sure, they're going to have all manner of characters, but yeah, go make your own mostly.
Let's see. We already kind of talked about that. What kind of real life fish / sea life would fishmen resemble in design? Hopefully a lot. Like, just like sea life is so crazy diverse.
Yeah.
You know, you wouldn't want the fishmen just to be one kind. Like, I hope it's not just fishmen with needle teeth in various sizes. I hope it's like all sorts of crazy shit. Like, some of them have octopus tentacles, some of them have crab features, some of them are like jellyfish. Like, I hope they're just all over the place.
Yeah, I agree. There is a diversity of life that is currently not being reflected in the overall Warhammer output. And there is a huge swathe of awesome that you could draw upon there. So I see no reason why you wouldn't. I like to think of the, say, needle teeth, big buggy eye type of fishermen as being, say, let's say, an equivalent of the Saurus, in that they are some sort of warrior caste or warrior species, perhaps, and that there will be others doing other things as well. I don't think the lizardmen are necessarily a bad model for doing a quick, I want to have some fishmen in my game, how could I work it? I could do it in a similar model and just build up my own fish varieties. You could do it that way. It would be a bit derivative, but it's certainly a decent start, and it will give you the option for having quite a broad array of different creatures. And then you can start pulling out all the crap you get from Aquaman sliding through, which would be all manner of cool, and wars at the bottom of the ocean, and crazy beams of light and spells and all weird nonsense going on. That's the sort of shit you want, with all manner of biological lights going all over the place, so we can watch it in our own little heads. Yeah.
And then Ryan Lynch asked, would the Fishmen being canon lead to DW doing a spin on Atlantis? They already have. Ulthuan is Atlantis.
Yeah. Ulthuan is Atlantis. And Ulthuan is also more strongly Greekly inspired than many realize, although there's a certain aspect of Japanese culture running through it too. The elves of Ulthuan are pretty much Atlantis. Hey, Kremlo, though. Kremlo.
Look what you assholes did. You actually got Kremlo to show up. You wouldn't stop talking about him.
Hey, Kremlo, he has descended from the stars to bring his wrath. Your cast fans came to me with your pearls of milk, pardon me, and let you bring down this heretic. And let you.
I fear nothing from a character that's been discontinued for 30 years. Get out of my. Get out.
I think we should reclaim Kremlo.
Never in my life.
And JG Binks, orc spores at the bottom of the ocean, fish orcs. You know what? That is not as ridiculous as it sounds.
It's not terrifying.
It's not. The chance of there being some form of native greenskin down there is, I think, far too high to be dismissed. The reason being that we have examples of several types of greenskin in the Warhammer world that do not match the spore model. In that the spore model for greenskins that came from 40k and has inspired greenskins nowadays has somehow also produced hobgoblins. It's also produced our noblars. It's also produced a variety of strains of greenskins that don't make sense within our established understanding of what the spores would do. That being the case, the chance of the Warhammer world's magic, or those 8 winds of magic slamming through everything all the time and changing those spores and not making some of them work in a different way down there, I think is next to nil. I think that is very likely. Fish orcs!
You mean forks? Biofoot, what would they use as currency? The nightmares of the insane and or children? Maybe.
Sure. Yeah, that'll do.
Yeah, but who knows? What's something valuable they found down at the bottom of the sea that is rare enough but plentiful enough? I don't know, shells or some nonsense.
I think I would be quite interested in building different societies for different versions, some of which would have no interest or concern with such things because they just do not think like humans. They do not think like us. Our immediate understanding of basic barter, trade, and similar is not something that concerns them. But then perhaps have other civilizations that are concerned with that. I think there's lots of answers to that question. And I think rather than saying it's probably this, I'd much rather say use your imagination. It could be almost anything.
Yep. Simpolo, I think you'd fear the berry milk. I feel like this. I know the internet well enough to be very suspicious of anything milk related immediately for various reasons. So I'm just not going to go down that dark alleyway.
Wise move.
Simpolo, I actually really like this question. Is the ancient city of Quintex perhaps an old Fishman enclave? Could very well be, because we have no fucking idea what the ancient city of Quintex is, to my knowledge.
Yeah,
even though it's Total War, it's a pretty important place. Yeah,
there's a host of ancient ruins, many of which have been built upon by the Lizardmen as well, that predate literally everything. And we don't have an answer other than it could be this, it could be that. Like, it could have been something to do with the dragons. It could be something to do with the dragon ogres. It could be something to do with the Naga. It could be something to do with the Fishmen. So the answer is it could be, I think, is the only thing we can say.
Ramazan, forgive me if I messed something up. It's been a while since I've read these books. In one of the Gotrek and Felix books, they descend to an underwater temple and fight some dark elf executioners. Is that structure a sunken elven city from the Sundering? Could it be a Fishman make? If I recall correctly, it is an elven city because they go down there for an elven artifact, and that's from Elf Slayer.
Yeah, Elf Slayer.
Yeah, and then in the first book, Malice and his entourage encounter a bandit city where they search for water wells before they are set upon by beastmen. The architecture is described as having maritime ornaments. Could these places be related to the Fishmen?
Probably not.
It could just be a human settlement that's really old and abandoned.
Yeah, particularly if you're talking maritime rather than necessarily deep ocean. Yeah.
Let's see.
It's probably have a very different style of architecture.
Let's see. Nasir says, I live on the Atlantic provinces of Canada and would really like to know how fishmen taste. But more seriously, lobsters can get like stupid big. Do we think the fishmen would ride super heavy lobsters or tame some giant lobster monsters as siege monsters?
Fucking right.
Yeah. I mean, we already have Promethean crabs, which are like fucking gigantic. So I don't see why a lobster monster would not be a thing.
Totally. And lobsters are proper scary things. I lived in a harbor when I was a kid, lived in a lighthouse, and I used to creel for lobsters, and every once in a while you'd catch a big one, which was really good because I sold them on to the local factory. But some of them were proper big, and you're like, wow. So would I be wanting to write about that sort of thing and reflect the craziness that I'd seen? Oh yeah, because lobsters are proper weird. Love them.
Yep. The real question is, would they be mounts or would they just be a subspecies of fishmen? Especially because of how like lobsters can be functionally almost immortal.
A nice crustacean species would be quite fun working off of that. Yeah, I definitely think there's something in that. I agree.
Then he asks about their magic. Do we imagine their magic users would come from the deepest, darkest trenches and maybe look something like anglerfish or other deep selling species? I'm assuming Gur might flare down to such places and go stagnant, therefore making Dar.
Yep, it would.
Yeah, there could absolutely be Dar down there. Gur is drawn to big sea monsters. Gyran is drawn to just the ocean in general. And Olgu, there's dark. There's lots of shadows, and if they have a civilization, Olgu's going to be down there in pretty notable amounts as well.
Yeah, totally. Oh God Almighty, Hammond, did you really say that?
Architecture.
Why do pirates love Altdorf? The architecture. Yeah, I was going to say something on that. I find the Winds of Magic particularly fascinating. I think that there is potentially a bigger discussion to have here, because actually, in general, is going to be pretty much repelled by most of that. So it immediately gives you a different character for how the fishmen are going to have. They're going to lack the passion, the bright burning anger that comes with other species, because the actually just doesn't get down there. Actually is almost repelled by water. So that is fascinating for how these species are going to occur, and possibly what happens to them when they hit the ground, when they hit the air. It's quite possible they might frenzy. The actually in the air makes them go mad. So there's all sorts of cool stories that you could tell with the way that the magic interacts with them and how they are or they are not used to it. I think that there's a lot of potential stories we could tell, but you'd really want to sit down and work through each of the winds, have a big think about exactly how they impact the societies down there. But that lack of actuary in particular, I think, is going to tell a big story for the species as a whole.
Bullhorn, what kind of magic would the Fishmen be able to cast? I would imagine at least beasts and shadow, probably also life. Death would probably death would probably be reasonable.
Yep. I mean, all the winds except for actually, really.
You think metal?
You could argue. Yeah, there's a lot of metal down at the bottom. Down at the bottom, it's all there. Plus they've got it in their blood. All the creatures have got it. Big empty space. It's no different to it's basically no different to being above ground. It's just you've got water instead of air. Sitting everywhere. And
for me, it would probably depend on what their technology looked like. Like if they had like actual tech, or if it was more just biotech. For me, as far as
probably go down the biotech route, wouldn't they? Because it's the unused part, really, in Warhammer.
Yeah. That being said, I would be shocked if they didn't have their own ocean lore of magic or some kind of like divine lore if they have gods.
Inevitably, it's going to be water-based. The vast majority of it will be water-based, controlling currents, controlling the heat down there, controlling light to a degree as well, and how that can be used. There's all manner of stuff. Why would druids run towards the sea?
Because Gyran. That one's I actually really like that one. That's a genuine Warhammer pun.
Fucking hell. Hammond. Oh, shit.
Wow, I can actually see a druid character using that pun in the setting.
Holy shit.
Well done, Hammond. I actually really like that one. That's a good one. That's funny.
I'm just going to bring up, no, they don't need to stop Hammond. It's half the fun sometimes.
Let's see. AV Pick Stream. His question is, would the Fishmen, do you think, be able to live long as elves, or would they have as short as lives as Skaven, or would they be more immortal like the lizardmen? It probably would depend on the subspecies.
Yeah, totally. There is a lot of general myth and science attached to fish that are unchanged for effectively millennia. And some fish that have apparently lived for incredible ages. So that almost certainly would be ported over to aspects of it. Now, it being the Warhammer world, it would be most likely ported over to the magical or priest-like section of it, in the same way that the the Grey Seers, for example, tend to live far longer than the standard Skaven, or those who sit in the Council of 13. And in a similar fashion, you're going to get yourself a variety of different ways that you could use it. So I think the answer would be all of the above, because we've got lots of different types of potential species down there. We do know that the merfolky types in general are of a similar type to harpies, which means they're of a similar age to 30s to 60s as they die towards old age, probably. But beyond that, we could pretty much go anywhere. And on Mandatus, actually, feedback mixed with old Fishman magic can help explain why Lokier became so brutal, exaggerated frenzy effect. Yeah, that's actually
cool. That's a good theory. That's a great theory.
The big problem with coming up with these theories as well is because while I was talking, I was actually coming up with a really cool magic system for those that use the old dark vents with the heat coming up from the heat vents.
Oh, yeah.
And a really cool fishman wizard type that comes up to the really hot waters and uses the actuary, where actuary and water rarely mixes because it's super heated because of the mantle of the earth.
The volcanic vents. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And then using that for a really cool, bursting volcanoes out of the water, streams of lava. It's fucking really cool in that. So yeah, so I say actuary's right out until it's right back in again, because all the winds of magic are going to manifest somewhere, as is often the case.
Yeah. Oh god, that would be a cool like almost like a fire belly, like kind of like a very distinct subculture within the Fishmen that uses unique lore. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah,
I like
totally.
that a lot.
Yeah, so thanks for that one, Mundatix. I think it's a really good idea.
AV Extreme, of all the Vampire Coast characters, I believe Arnis Assault Spite might be the one who's interacted with the Fishmen the most. What do you think? And how do you think the Fishmen would think of the daughter of Mathlan/Manon or whatever that guy's name is? So she is the daughter of Manon. And her thing is that she was functionally adopted by Manon. And she was literally taken in by mermaids and like the not the naiads, the sea version. And like she was raised on an island by them. Like they brought her food and sustenance, and she grew up because she had a mermaid tail, and she was cast out of the Norscan tribe she was in. And so yeah, she probably would know a lot more than anybody else about what's down there. Though whether she would see them as friend or foe, like, you know, it'd be hard to say.
I think it's just like the real above ground world. There's going to be a whole mixture of different friends and foes sitting out there. I just want to bring up this one just so that I can bring up, because I do mapping streams, but I've stopped for the last wee while because my computer is dying a death. I've replaced my computer. I just haven't moved it over. I'll be doing this pretty dang soon. So thanks very much for bringing that up, Rocker Boy. And I'm really delighted you enjoy me doing my mapping. I will be mapping more. Hey, Mr. Pig. Yeah, exactly. Manganese nodes grow on the ocean floor, so metal ore. I agree, because the metal will be there somewhere in the same way that actually will be there somewhere. But I think both of them will need a good bit of thought for how best to integrate them. Good idea, Mr. Big. Thanks very much.
Okay, so just because I'm looking at the time, I'm going to start kind of speeding our way through these and speeding the ones that we've kind of touched on anyway. Is the Fishman Sharkman mod in total? I haven't tried the mod. I'll have to get a look at it sometime.
I don't want to play Fishman now.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a mod, but you absolutely can. See, do we know? Okay, so a lot of the questions that y'all are asking about, do we know X? The vast majority of the answer is going to be no. Like, if we haven't already touched it, the answer is just no. So that's going to let me skip a lot of these. So in the Mordheim stream, you guys mentioned that there's absolutely a chance the Fishermen might have been present during what happened due to the river and lake. Does this mean Fishermen could utilize river and lake waters to spy on landlocked nations? Yes.
Absolutely. The Fishmen, right from the very first iteration, could use both fresh and seawater. They were not restricted to seawater. They were one of those rare ones that could do the cross thing. But again, there's different types of Fishmen, so who can say?
Yeah, who interacts with them the most? Interestingly enough, the Dark Elves. The Dark Elves have by far the most, and it's never pleasant. Let's see. Are Fishmen always a threat to consider when traveling the ocean? I would say so, but so are many other things. Are the great beasts of the ocean, such as Krakens, directly related to the Fishmen? They seem to be, but I don't think we could say that with confidence, whether they're like integrated or whether the Fishmen just dominate them because they live in a similar environment.
I would suggest that it's very similar to how any of the great species of the Warhammer world are integrated with the local civilizations. For example, griffins, are they related to the Empire? Everyone generally says yes. And then they watch a griffin tear through the local community and everyone goes, well, that's not so integrated, is it? The griffins are controlled through a mixture of breeding or training or magic or some equivalent. And I imagine the same will be the case for the Fishmen, where they will have access to certain creatures under the correct circumstances while simultaneously being predated upon by them.
See, a lot of these are the questions, unfortunately, I'm going to be skipping. Let's see. Black Angle, thank you very much for the sweet message to me and Andy. A lot of nice words. Thank you very much. We really appreciate it.
You rock. We love you.
So we answer that. Would the Dark Gods be aware of the Fishmen? If the Fishmen were at all sentient, yes. Because they would have fun fact that would kind of mean that there'd be Fishman version of demons as well, like what the Fishmen imagined demons to be like. There would be demons that manifest like that, which would probably be really fucking scary.
There's going to be all manner of equivalent, basically fish beastmen communities, things that are as weird to the fishmen as beastmen are to humans. For example, they are going to be down there. There's going to be fish beastmen, for want of a better description. There's going to be chaos cults. There's going to be infiltrations. There's going to be weird fishy type demons. There's going to be the manifestation of them with different versions that will be horrific. Yes, to all of that. It's the big world down there.
Has Games Workshop ever expanded on them? Yes, a lot. We've talked about a lot, and they've shown up in Age of Sigmar, like recently in the 3rd edition. They got very heavily mentioned, got a whole paragraph to themselves. So they seem to be, if anything, becoming more relevant. So I would not really be shocked because there's Games Workshop is kind of always looking for more AOS races because they tend to like more factions that aren't as big. So it wouldn't shock me at all if they came out as a new Destruction race, because Destruction could use another non-greenskin race. Let's see. Can Fishmen go on land? Yep, they absolutely can.
Yes.
There's talk in multiple books about them coming on to the shores on moonless nights to attack and take people down. Are Fishmen inherently evil like Skaven? I don't know if I call them evil, because we don't know what motivates them and what they're up to.
Okay. And I'm going to say something controversial. Skaven are not inherently evil. I'm not saying that lots of we're going to move into moral relativism relatively soon, but I would take exception to that as a comment.
We don't have time.
Quite. That's all I'm saying. That's a talk for another Skaven day.
Let's see. Are Fishmen like beastmen in that it's varied fish, faces, and other aquatic creatures, but we only get described one type? I would say that's probably likely. But
very possibly the case. But then you'd just be basically saying that humans were ape men.
Yeah. I would say like they would probably be more like beastmen, where the same like type of troop could have many different features, as opposed to like the lizardmen that tend to be fairly homogenous by subspecies. But you know, that would probably have a very different answer from like a role play perspective versus a battle game perspective, because with the battle game you only have like so much sculpts you can work with and yada yada yada. Kabanda, what do we know of the shark? We already talked about that. Okay. So this is actually good. Do you think Kabanda wants to know, is there any truth behind the connection between Stromfels and Khorne?
If there is, I am very saddened.
So we're going to say no.
It diminishes the setting to try and suggest that the other gods are nothing more than the chaos gods using a different face. There are many examples where that is definitely the case. Char is Tzeentch under a different name, but I strongly disapprove of Stromfels just being Khorne under a different name. They're nothing alike. Just because there's blood involved and blood in the water in no way means that they are the same.
Yeah, me and Andy are not fans of a fairly popular theory that all of the gods are just the chaos gods with a different mask on. We hate that theory because it's boring.
It's not only boring, it doesn't make sense within the setting or any example of how it's done. Now, having said that, some writers for Warhammer don't just subscribe to it. It's how they write their Warhammer, but it has never been how I've written mine when I was doing it.
Let's say, since it's Fishmen, did the humans name them that way, or is it elder races?
Humans. The Fishmen, in the same way that the lizard men are not called the lizard men, they've got a variety of different names for their bits. It's just an outside name for us to understand it. The Fishmen would be the same. Yeah,
you have to keep in mind that there's always kind of a thing of like authors trying to explain to you, the reader, what you're looking at and dealing with versus what the races themselves would call it. Like the elves would probably not call the lizardmen. They would probably have a very specific Eltherin term for it. We don't really get to hear it that much because the writers are trying to communicate to you what the elf is talking about.
Yeah, I was to give you an example of that. I was just literally last night writing a career for halfling chefs, and I didn't want to call it chef because that's a Bretonnian word. But I did, and I know what the halfling word for it is. But if I did that, everyone would go, "What the fuck is this career?" And that is the issue that you're often left with. You're like, what is this thing? The second you use the correct term. Dwarfs aren't called dwarfs by dwarfs. They're called the Dawi. But nevertheless, we still use the word dwarfs to encompass that particular species.
Kind of an interesting question. Would the Fishmen have a land form and a water form? From what we see, no. They're just able to breathe on land. But it could be some of them might have.
So I'm going to say yes for some of them. In fact, I'm going to go beyond could to definitely yes for some, given that the Nereids, the Oceanids, the Naiads, the Dryads, they are all shapeshifters, every single last one of them. And some of them also have slight connotations with the moon. So the fact that they've had children and those children have almost certainly taken on some of their traits means that some of the Fishman species out there are almost certainly gently shapeshifting too in one fashion or another.
Okay, this is a fucking cool question.
Jiggy, I love fucking cool ones.
Do you think some of the fish would breed like salmon, where they release their eggs upstream and eventually have to make their way to the ocean?
See, now, if I was writing it, the answer would be yes. You would be looking to try and ensure that you had methods of bringing these otherworldly, and I do mean otherworldly because the oceans are so big, these otherworldly creatures into contact with and into conflict with the other characters that you are attempting to use, either in a story or as a roleplay game or anything else. And that is one way to do it, to show that there are certain types of species that require moving into freshwater to breed and then moving out of the freshwater to continue on their lives. And I think that the fact that they can already do that with their initial interpretation of them, which was that they can work in both freshwater and saltwater, gives you a very good reason to do that, which immediately brings them into conflict, which immediately makes them perhaps even more secretive to try and hide the fact, because in many respects this could be the source of some of the gods of the river rumors and myths that exist, purely because they have to go to a particular lake for one group of them. Now, I'm not saying the entire species does that. No, screw that. But I am saying that perhaps one offshoot or one group does that, because that's super fun and makes for a really nice scenario.
Yeah, plus that would like really make some interesting stuff with that. When people encounter them on the rivers or lakes, they're either encountering breeders or they're encountering freshborns, which could mean that they're like the freshborns are particularly smaller or more aggressive, or the breeders are especially aggressive because they're vulnerable. Like there could be some really interesting things there. Half Crown, do all the various gods of the empire over lakes and rivers have any influence over the fishmen?
I think that's a really fascinating question. One of the biggest mistakes that are often made by people who play, for example, Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, is to conflate Manan, the god of the seas, with the gods of the rivers, who are completely different freshwater deities with a completely different structure associated with very different spirits to the ocean. They are not the same. But if we're looking at a species that can work in both saltwater and freshwater, then there is going to be some crossover there, which means that there is going to be spirits that they encounter that are different, which means that we're going to have basically diplomacy going on as we move from one type to another type. Are some of those freshwater gods going to exist in the fishmen that make their way through their lives? Yes, which means some will be worshipped, some won't be worshipped. There's going to be lots of connections between them, but it's going to be down to the communities. If you're a fishman community that lives in the center of the ocean, they're never going to even see fresh water, probably for their entire lives or any of their ancestors or descendants' lives. So it's going to be different according to it. And where they are geographically located, I think will change that for them. So the answer is it's probably very complicated.
Yep. Let's see. Are there Beastmen fishmen? Technically, yes. They're called lakemen. You can find them in the Knights of the Grail 2nd edition book. It's a fun read.
Yeah, and I would say that that is a starting point for the enormous swathe that there almost certainly exists everywhere. Because chaos, the closer you get to the gates, the more everything mutates, and the more that the equivalent of beastmen will be the case.
Mike Tusky, what kind of gods would the fishermen worship? I would take into account what their environment would be like. What are the things that they would feel they need to worship? What are the things that would be dangerous to them or critical to their way of life? And that would probably heavily influence what their gods would be. If they have gods.
Yeah, they probably do. It's Warhammer.
Yep. Let's see. Why are fishermen only kind of seen near Lestria? If that's where, why not do they go to Araby or Bretonia? They might be. There might be other forces that live in the oceans around there that are not friendly to them and therefore push them out.
And plus, there's loads of fishmen equivalents over there already, as we've discussed previously in the stream.
Yes. Let's see. Okay, we've already answered that. We've answered that. Are there any sea monsters that are regarded to be useful or problematic to them? We know they tend to have a lot of krakens. They tend to work. I mean, they tend to work with all of the species, but I would not, like Andy said earlier with griffins, I wouldn't be surprised if there's krakens that prey on them or behemoths that prey on them or whatever. It probably just depends on what's going on.
Does for me. I agree.
Let's see. Moving on. This could be kind of a fun question. Of Infiltrator Troy asks, how do you think fishmen would, do you think there would be fishmen that perceive the world in different ways, not just relying on eyesight, considering how dark the deep ocean is and eyesight isn't that useful?
Yes.
That would be super fucking fun, actually.
Definitely. I was already considering that because I was building in my head a set of rules and how I'd portray them. And I would almost certainly have some form of deep one equivalent where eyesight is not a requirement. They're using a very different set of senses. Plus, you've also got water pressure and how that's going to influence them as well. And I think there's some super fascinating ways that you could take that for how they can bring themselves up to the surface. So yeah, there's all manner of cool in there.
Yep. Space Hero, can fantasy fishmen are in AOS? They already are. They're called the Aboleth, aka Chasm Dwellers.
Yep.
Let's see. How similar are the Lovecraftian deep ones in the Fishmen? I imagine there would be some strong similarities because Games Workshop likes to steal ideas. That is their bread and butter.
I don't think that they could almost help themselves. Although I would like to hope that they would go much further than that.
Okay, we already answered that. We already answered that. Any relation to crab people look like crab, or what is it? Look like people, taste like crab. Let's see. We already answered that. We answered that. Is it possible to communicate with the fishmen? Probably.
In the same way it's possible to communicate with the lizardmen. They're a different species with a different language. They are intelligent. We know that. But they are also, broadly speaking, antagonists to the vast majority of what we would consider to be the civilizations of the Warhammer world.
Yep. Jock Diego, do fishmen have ladies, or are they like the lizardmen with no gender? So, okay, there's this kind of annoying thing where like the English language decided to do the stupid thing where men means two different things, and that it can mean like mankind is in like the species, or it could mean just the gender of men. But when you're talking about lizard men, fish men, beast men, you're talking about a species, not a gender. But think about how fucking difficult it is for a human to, like, if I put two fish in front of you and one was male and one was female and they didn't have like extreme dimorphism, you would not be able to tell the difference. Fishmen would probably be the exact same.
Yeah.
But I would be very shocked if they were not gendered.
I would be beyond shocked if they didn't have different sexes.
Yeah, because that's kind of a lizardman greenskin specific thing. Not being gendered. Oh gosh. Okay.
There's still more. How many is there?
There's only like we're done.
Oh, we're done. Oh wow, that was quick.
Yep, we're done because the rest of these we appreciate them, but they technically came in afterwards and we're out of time. So sorry.
Oh, you naughty people posting them after we started this stream.
The last question I will allow in is, do we think there'd be any big connections between the Fishmen and the Moons? Which we covered this in the Morslib episode, and I would say fucking absolutely to 1,000,000,000%.
You've got to remember that the tidal swells are put in place by the moons. The entire sweep of their wind, for want of a better description, the way the currents move are dictated by the movements of Mansleib to a large degree, and Morsleib to a chaotic degree. You've got to get in your heads that this is not the real world. In the Warhammer world, they have two moons, and the second moon is massively erratic and often appears in a variety of different ways, often closer to the Warhammer world than it really should be. That being the case, tides are flung in different directions and in unpredictable directions, meaning that their lives to a degree would almost be dictated by the moons, even if they never actually saw them. It's the Warhammer world, so if there's any wizards out there, they'll feel them. They'll be able to actually perceive them up through the great depths of the water. So I'd say that moon worship is very likely. And if I was trying to create them as a species and try to ensure that I had a species that interacted with the vast majority of the rest of the Warhammer world, I would want to add a detail like that, because that gives them a reason to come to the surface, to come up towards where they can see the moons, to be spotted, to take part in the world. Because if they're just sitting at the bottom of the ocean, they as well might not exist. What's the point of even having them in your setting? There isn't one. What you want to do is bring them up and use them. And that would be one way of doing it. Not the only way, obviously. There's many ways you could do that. I would say yes.
Yeah, and I would say that there are specific mentions that some of the fishmen only attack when there's no moon.
No moon, yeah.
So if there's no moonlight and the ocean is still, that's the only time they come up. So it could be some of them are afraid of the moon, or they know the tides are unpredictable, so they only come up when that's not a factor. So that's something to consider.
Or perhaps that's when the winds rise and it makes them angrier, or perhaps there's a whole host of things you could do with it. Or they hold the moons particularly sacred and they don't want the moon to be looking at them while they're doing particular deeds. There's all manner of cool that you could drop into that. Just these little little snapshots of detail that have been provided can create vast swathes of what the society could be. I personally really like I was about to say lizardmen, the fishmen.
I do too.
I would really like them not to be called fishmen, because I am freaking done with take an animal and put man on the end because it's shit.
Hey, I think Chasm Dweller or Aboleths are great names. Aboleth is definitely very Lovecraftian taken.
Yeah, totally. And I think that I think though them for our dark elfy ones, possibly even having originally come from there, would be beautiful. I really like it. And it speaks to an ancient species. I really like that.
Yeah,
so
but we're out of time. We gotta go. So
yeah, we do.
Yeah.
I want to say thanks to everyone, because we got an awful lot out of what looked like it could be a very, very small subject, but it wasn't. It was a huge one. And your questions were super cool. Thanks so much. That was great.
Yeah, the questions were awesome from the live chat and the Discord. Thank you all very much. We appreciate y'all being here. I hope you all enjoyed Spooky Month, where we kind of did like a lot of very spooky themes. I'm gonna really be wanting to go to some kind of non-spooky topics. I really want to be hitting the Empire hard probably for the next month or two. There's a lot of cool things going on. As a very quick thing, make sure to check out Lawhammer over on this channel where you are right now. Subscribe if you're on YouTube, follow if you're on Twitch, and also subscribe if you're on Twitch to make sure that you don't miss any episodes. Lawhammer series is fantastic. Go back, check out episode 1. It just crossed over 15,000 views. It's looking great. Wow, so go check that out. Watch it, get caught up with the series. The last episode was amazing from what I've heard. I'm going to watch it tomorrow. Also, make sure to check out Rookery Publications. They stream every Saturday at 1 p.m. British time.
And so 7 p.m. British time. Yeah, totally.
7 p.m. 1 p.m. my time, except for daylight savings has fucked everything up now. So every Friday, check out Lawhammer. Every Saturday, check out Rookery Publications. Do you know who you're going to have on this week?
We are doing our own Halloweeny thing this week.
Oh, okay, so it's gonna be a special episode. So make sure you that. And then last
inside the spookery.
Oh, you tried hard for that one. Good job. You added a letter.
It was tough. It was super hard to not.
Really stretching those creative muscles. And then if you'd like, please check me over on Loremaster of Sotek on Twitch and YouTube. Also, feel free to join our Discord communities. We're active there, and lots of things are going on. And thank you all for watching, and we're going to get out of here.
I would also like to just add, because we are on my channels, make sure you do go over to Sotek's and do the clicky subscribe thing over there too, particularly given that we do our questions, pre-submitted ones, over on Sotek's Discord channel. There should hopefully be a link for that sitting inside YouTube if you're over there. If there isn't one, I'll bloody add one, because I meant to add one. So there should be a link for that already for you to be able to jump into Sotek's Discord. Do so, because that's where you can put your pre-submitted questions.
Yep, and that's it for us. Thank you all very much for watching, and we will see you guys next week.
You certainly shall. And with that,
bye-bye. Vote will be on this channel. Bye. Vote will be on this channel. Bye.